Blessed love and peace in Rastafåri. We are in the village outside the night spot. I get here about those hours ago. It's round about midnight now. I get here about those hours ago, doing some teams correspondence and preparation for this joint, notes, sharings after the completion of Shabbat just a few hours ago. So when I get here, it's been a while since I post up here at night, like serious. The initial intention was to record this across the street where I'm looking at the moment, what they call the steps. Blessed love and peace, brethren. Class in session, round about midnight.
No, I just come up here to watch
The festivities.
to be a social scientist.
Well, I'm saying classes in session because I'm doing class right now. So I'm just letting you know I'm recording something right now. All right. You're okay? Yeah, all right, cool. Peace and blessings. So it's been a minute since I've been out here at this hour. And this is the most active I've seen it. This is the first occasion, to be honest, I see African kinfolk lined up. Usually it's just in and out in the spot and some cats hanging out. But brethren have been and sisters have been lined up for over those hours. So that's the spot. Initially, the intention is recording in the midst of it, but it's a little bit hot right now. Lightweight, low key, to be doing this type of joint there. So it is being recorded here. Two things that are observed in this process. One is, again, a reminder of the mindset of midnight and how cats is less inclined towards reasoning in an in-depth way. And that recognition being applied to the aggregate of macro society. When cats is enveloped in it, cats is less inclined for reasoning. So just being mindful of that and proceeding accordingly. The second joint I observe as while I'm across the street at the library, catching the wafts of the vapors, the smoke fumes, and coughing. So in that respect, being recognizing how sensitive the lungs are when not acclimated to the smoke experience. Also being mindful of it being utilized as a low-key effective weapon of hostility, particularly coming from kinfolk of African ancestry who have strong bodies, vaccinated, and thus not necessarily being mindful of or aware of what is being carried, and then smoking and emitting that into the atmosphere. Potency. And that might sound hyperbole, that might sound exaggerated and paranoid or whatever, but right now reading the narrative of His Majesty Haile Selassie and the imposition of poison gas as a weapon of warfare, Italia on Ethiopia just over a century ago, and the technology is way advanced further now. So just mindful of this, and also mindful of the frame shot. So anyways, all that being said, in recent days, we have a recent session with kinfolk on the topic of marriage, and specifically a man having two wives, and discerning what the permissibility of that is within our respective religious paths, and then where we get those, how we make those decisions, where we get our teachings from. So this is a response to that reasoning. Some of the articulation and the teachings coming from a number of different traditions, particularly specifically and biasedly from the Bible, Christianity, and Torah, the tradition of Israel, but then also drawing from other traditions as well, specifically talking about or specifically addressing teachings concerning marriage on the one, the permissibility of a man having two wives, what the rule is, and then what also the actuality, what the practice is amidst the rules, and then addressing the additional elements concerning adultery, divorce, and other components and other experiences specifically regarding the marriage relationship between man and woman. So that is the topic for this joint. And at this point we got about 9 pages of text to recite. So the intention is, God willing, to give a brief description of the topics here, before reading the actual text from the Holy Scriptures, and then concluding in that respect. So this is the endeavor, and we proceed. So we begin with we're beginning with the Torah, and then continuing with the Gospels of the Bible, and then going into the other traditions of the Quran, Buddhist texts from the Upanishads of Hinduism, as well as the Bhagavad Gita, and then Chinese traditional texts, the Lunye, Tao Te Ching, and Menke. Not necessarily in that order. It's actually Lunye, Menke, and Tao Te Ching. So that's the syllabus for this joint today. So with that being said, we get into it. So the first we begin, like I said, with the tradition of Israel, Torah, and again, the basic sequence of these passages. The first sequence, the first part, addresses just the experience of the bond of marriage between a man and a woman, and then the second section of this part addresses the specific experience of a man having multiple wives, at least 2 wives, and then the third component of this particular part is the additional experiences of corruption of the flesh, adultery, consequences, and addition. So that's the first part of the section, and so this is the first readings from that section. Again, this is Torah. I already recite a blessing when preparing the materials here, so I'm saying from reciting it again at this moment, we're simply going to continue on. So the first passage is from Bereshit. These first passages begin primarily, come primarily from the narrative of creation in Bereshit, the beginning of the Torah, the first book of Moshe Rabbeinu, otherwise known as Genesis. So the first one is Bereshit chapter 1, verse 27 to 28, and it reads, and Elohim created man in Elohim's image. In the image of Elohim, Elohim created him, male and female, Elohim created them. And Elohim blessed them, and Elohim said to them, be fruitful and multiply, and fill the earth, and subdue it, and rule over the fish of the sea, and over the fowl of the sky, and over all the beasts that tread upon the earth. That's the completion of that passage. And again, this is the first mitzvah, this is the first commandment that's given to life on earth. Man, human beings, humanoids on earth, be fruitful and multiply, to bring forth new life, to join together, bring forth new life. First mitzvah, first commandment that is conveyed. And so continuing on, again, still within the narrative of creation, we get into the specifics of the bond between man and woman. And this is Bereshit chapter 2, verse 19 through 25. 19 a 25. And Elohim God formed from the earth every beast of the field and every fowl of the heavens, and Elohim brought it to man to see what he would call it. And whatever the man called each living thing, that was its name. And man named all the cattle and the fowl of the heavens and all the beasts of the field. But for man he did not find a helpmate opposite him. And Elohim God caused a deep sleep to fall upon man, and he slept. And Elohim took one of his sides, and Elohim closed the flesh in its place. And Elohim God built the side that Elohim had taken from man into a woman. And Elohim brought her to man. And man said, this time it is bone of my bones and flesh of my flesh. This one shall be called Isha, woman, because this one was taken from Ish, man. Therefore man shall leave his far and his more, and cleave to his wife, and they shall become one flesh. Now they were both naked, the man and his wife, but they were not ashamed. And that concludes this passage from Torah. So we have the creation of man, we have the creation of woman, we have the establishment of the relationship between man and woman, helpmate, purposefulness within the relationship, and this is the pretext and the methodology for bringing forth new life. And so that's what this next passage addresses, the first bearing of new life from Adam and Eve. This Bereshit still continuing with the narrative of creation and the first beings of the earth, and it's Bereshit chapter 4, verse 1 a 2, chapter 4, verse 1 through 2. Now the man knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, and she said, I have acquired a man with Elohim. And she continued to bear his brother Abel, and Abel was a shepherd of the flocks, and Cain was a tiller of the soil. And that concludes the reading from that passage. So there we have the completion of the first mitzvah, to be fruitful and multiply. and the affirmation of the marriage between man and woman, and bringing forth life into this universe. So, the lineage continues. That's Adam and Eve, and those are the first children. And then from the first children born to Adam and Eve, there's the lineage that is established. And then along the lineage, one of the descendants is Avram, later known as Avraham, who becomes the patriarch of the children of Israel. And so in this lineage, there's the affirmation of the covenant between Elohim, God, and Avraham. And that covenant includes relationship with nature, and also the experience of marriage, relationship between husband and wife, and continuing the lineage of life through the bond of man and woman. So this is the affirmation of the relationship of Abraham and his wife in that context, in the lineage. This is Bereshit chapter 12, 12, verse 1 a 5. And Elohim said to Avram, "Go forth from your land and from your birthplace and from your father's house to the land that I will show you, and I will make you into a great nation, and I will bless you, and I will aggrandize your name, and you shall be a blessing. And I will bless those who bless you, and the one who curses you I will curse, and all the families of the earth shall be blessed in you." And Avram went as Elohim had spoken to him, and Lot went with him, and Avram was 75 years old when he left Haran. And Avram took Sarai his wife, and Lot his brother's son, and all their possessions that they had acquired, and the souls they had acquired in Haran, and they went to go to the land of Canaan, and they came to the land of Canaan. And continuing further, specifically concerning the affirmation of the covenant between Elohim and Abraham Avinu. This is continuing with the passage of Bereshit 17, 1 a 9. Genesis chapter 17, verse 1 through 9. And Avram was 99 years old, and Elohim appeared to Avram, and Elohim said to him, "I am the Almighty God, walk before me and be perfect, and I will place my covenant between me and between you, and I will multiply you very, very greatly." And Avram fell upon his face, and Elohim spoke to him, saying, "As for me, behold, my covenant is with you, and you shall become the father of a multitude of nations. And your name shall no longer be called Avram, but your name shall be Abraham. For I have made you the father of a multitude of nations, and I will make you exceedingly fruitful, and I will make you into nations, and kings will emerge from you. And I will establish my covenant between me and between you and between your seed after you throughout their generations as an everlasting covenant, to be to you for a God, and to your seed after you. And I'll give you and your seed after you the land of your sojournings, the entire land of Canaan, for an everlasting possession, and I'll be to them for a God." And Elohim said to Abraham, "And you shall keep my covenant, you and your seed after you, throughout their generations." So again, the affirmation of the relationship between Abraham and Elohim, and the affirmation of marriage, the affirmation of the lineage of life, and the responsibilities, the way of being on this earth amidst that relationship. So that continues on onto the progeny of Avraham Avinu, including Yitzhak and then his grandson Yaakov. And so towards the end of the book of the first book of Moshe Rabbeinu, Bereshit, otherwise known as Genesis, there's the description of the entire lineage of Avraham Avinu's grandson Yaakov. Yaakov at that point in the narrative has his own house, has his own children and grandchildren, and so this is a description of the children, all the lives that are in the house of Yaakov Avinu, and who are continuing in that covenant that is established between Elohim and Avraham Avinu, and then later Yitzhak, and then also Yaakov. This is Bereshit, creation, 46, 8 a 27, Genesis chapter 46, 8 through 27. And these are the names of the children of Israel who were coming to Egypt. Yaakov and his sons. Yaakov's firstborn was Reuven, and the sons of Reuven were Hanach and Palu, Hezron and Carmi. And the sons of Shimon were Yemuel, Yamin, Ochad, Yachin, and Zoar, and Saul, the son of the Canaanites. And the sons of Levi were Gershon, Kehath, and Merari. And the sons of Yehuda were Onan, Shelah, Peretz, and Zerah. Now and Onan had died in the land of Canaan, and the sons of Peretz were Hezron and Hamul. And the sons of Issachar were Tola, Puvah, Yob, and Shimron. And the sons of Zebulun were Sered, Elon, and Yalil. And these are the sons of Leah that she bore to Yaakov in Padan Aram, and Dinah his daughter. All the souls of his sons and daughters were 33. And the sons of Gad were Ziphion, Hagi, Shuni, and Ezbon, Eri, Erodi, and Ereli. And the sons of Asher were Imnah, Ishva, Ishvi, and Bria, and Sarah their sister. And the sons of Bria were Heber and Malkiel. These are the sons of Zilpah, whom Lavan gave to his daughter Leah, and she bore these to Yaakov 16 souls. The sons of Rachel, Yaakov's wife, were Joseph and Benjamin, and to Joseph were born in the land of Egypt, whom Asenat, the daughter of Potipharah, the governor of On, bore to him, Manasseh and Ephraim. And the sons of Benjamin were Bela, Becher, Ashbel, Gerah, Naaman, Ehi, and Rosh, Mupim, Hupim, and Ard. These are the sons of Rachel, who were born to Yaakov. All the souls were 14. And the sons of Dan, Hushim, and the sons of Naphtali were Yazil, Guni, Yazer, and Shilem. These are the sons of Bilhah, whom Lavan had given to his daughter Rachel, and she bore these to Yaakov. All the souls were 7. And all the souls coming to Egypt with Yaakov, those descended from him, excluding the wives of Yaakov's sons, all the souls were 66. And Joseph's sons who were born to him in Egypt, 2 souls. All the souls of the house of Yaakov who came to Egypt were 70. So that is the completion in the first book of Moshe Rabbeinu, or the first book of Moshe Rabbeinu, of the lineage, the description of the lineage, the life on this earth, be fruitful and multiply, as it continues to be manifested through the house of Yaakov Avinu. And then later on, as a continuation, Moshe Rabbeinu was born a number of generations later, and in the works that Moshe Rabbeinu does in terms of liberating, guiding the children of Israel out of bondage in Egypt, out of slavery, giving the reminder of the mitzvot, the commandment, the covenant, the ways of walking, and the rules of behavior in this life. So this is what Moshe, this is part of what Moshe does. And in those rules, there is the affirmation of marriage and the affirmation of procreation, having children, and the affirmation of the additional responsibilities of proper relationship between man and woman. So what I share here is just one excerpt from the 10 Commandments that speaks specifically about the relationship, beginning with recognizing far more, and continuing to continue on to the respect for other the relationship between other men and the wives of the other men. So this is Shmot, Exodus, chapter 20, 12 a 14. Exodus chapter 20, verse 12 through 14. Honor your far and your more, in order that your days may be lengthened on the land that Elohim your God is giving you. You should not murder, you should not commit adultery, you should not steal, you should not bear false witness against your neighbor. You should not covet your neighbor's house. You should not covet your neighbor's wife, his manservant, his maidservant, his ox, his donkey, or whatever belongs to your neighbor. So that wraps up the first section here, specifically addressing the teachings concerning marriage and procreation. So again, it's a primordial experience, a primordial guidance from creation. It's the first mitzvah, and it's affirmed amidst all the different trials and tribulations. It is established as a covenant with later generations, Abraham Avinu, later on to Yitzhak and Yaakov, and then continue on to Moshe Rabbeinu. That's the address concerning marriage. That's the basic teachings concerning marriage from Torah. The basic gist of it. Now we're going to do a review. We're going to do like a rewind and look at the specific topic of, we can call it polygamy, but just 2 wives. Just the concept of a man having further than just one wife. Not just the permissibility, but the actual practice, and then the rules that are described concerning that act, concerning that lifestyle, or concerning that path. So this next section is addressing that specific topic of a man having 2 wives. We've already seen it in some of the passages that I just recite, but now we are continuing. That's challenging. Alright, so guess what? I did not put these in here yet. That's okay. We'll do it on the fly. Because we flexy. That's going to take some patience though. So we just gotta load this up because it was not prepared. We had the first section done. That's what we get for doing this at midnight. Haha. Ain't no excuses. Yeah, but just saying. No, that's the banter. Alright, so we get specific in this next section is basically just citing some of the different examples of the practice of a man having further than one wife. And as I mentioned, we've already seen that in the passages that I just recite, we've already seen that being articulated as just the context of what is shared before. So the first example here is the relationship between Avraham Avinu and Sarah, Imenu, Abraham and Sarah. And in addition to having Sarah as a wife, Sarah actually solicits Abraham, tells Abraham to take on another wife so that they can have children. And there's a very pragmatic necessity because up to that point, being over 90 years old, elders, both Avraham Avinu and Sarah Imenu, even though they have yet to be conferred with that name yet at this point in the narrative, both are without children, and that's a necessity. There's house, there's servants, and additionally, but there has yet to be an inheritor of the legacy and the mitzvah, and additionally. And there's a pragmatic necessity of children taking care of elders, the parents, and additionally. And so when a wife is without that child, then there's a pragmatic benefit of the wife having a child through another wife of the husband, so that there's some further direct assurance of well-being and being cared for in the latter stages of life. So this is what this passage is addressing. It is, again, Bereshit chapter 16, 1 a 3, which is Genesis chapter 16, 1 through 3. Now Sarai, Avram's wife, had not borne to him, and she had an Egyptian handmaid named Hagar. And Sarai said to Avram, "Behold, now Elohim has restrained me from bearing. Please come to my handmaid. Perhaps I will be built up from her." And Avram hearkened to Sarai's voice. So Sarai, Avram's wife, took Hagar the Egyptian, her handmaid, at the end of 10 years of Avram's dwelling in the land of Canaan, and she gave her to Avram, her husband, for a wife. So that is the narrative, and that is one example of a husband having two wives. So we continue on to the next passage. It also exists within Bereshit, Genesis. Chapter 32. Verse 23 a 25. 32, 23 a 25. So now this is the grandson of Avraham Avinu. This is Yaakov Avinu, Jacob. And at this point, Jacob has four wives. He marries two sisters and the servants of each of the sisters, one servant of each of the sisters. And this is also through not just the condone or the approval, but through the solicitation of the wives themselves, giving the handmaids to the husband to bear further children within each one's own respective house. So the passage here reads just a summary of the conditions rather than talking about all the details of it. And he arose during that night, and he took his two wives and his two maidservants and his 11 children, and he crossed the ford of the Yabok. And he took them and brought them across the stream, and he took across what was his. And Yaakov was left alone, and a man wrestled with him until the break of dawn. So again, this is a summary of the fact of Yaakov Avinu having four wives, and from amidst his four wives having 11 children at that point. In actuality, he has 12 children. One of them is a daughter, and later there's a 12th son that is born as well. Baruch Hashem. So that is, again, another example of the actuality of a man having further than one wife within the Torah, and it being a foundational a foundation within the practice and within the tradition and narrative of Israel, Bnei Israel. So continuing on, we get into some of the rules that Moshe Rabbeinu articulates concerning these conditions. And so now, this is a number of generations later. This goes into the laws. It's starting to sprinkle here now. Oh, that's funny because we have blue sky all this time. It's difficult to see now. Everything's dark. This is a few generations later. And again, this is Moshe Rabbeinu establishing and reminding the laws, the covenant of behavior and righteousness. So this is Devarim 21, 15 a 17. That is Deuteronomy chapter 21, verse 15 through 17. If a man has two wives, one beloved and the other despised, and they bear him sons, the beloved one and the despised one, and the firstborn son is from the despised one, then it will be on the day he, the husband, bequeaths his property to his sons, that he will not be able to give the son of the beloved wife birthright precedence over the son of the despised wife, the actual firstborn son. Rather, he must acknowledge the firstborn, the son of the despised wife, and give him a double share in all that he possesses, because he, the firstborn son, is the first of his strength. Then he has the birthright entitlement. That's the end of the passage. Right reading for this, and again, it's just a matter of fact addressing of the actualities of a man having multiple wives. So it's something that is part of the law. It's not just a matter of it being permissible. It's a matter of it being part of the life, and then giving the rules about it. This specifically pertaining to the rules of inheritance between the sons of the different wives. So that is part of the rule. That's part of the law and the heritage. So we continue on into... So then now, one of the rules concerning a man having multiple wives is that when a king is established over the entire people, there are rules. There are stricter rules concerning that king, and one of those rules is that the king is prohibited, is unallowed to have many wives. Maybe multiple wives, but not many wives. If he's rich, and additionally, the concern is that him having many wives is going to be a cravenous appetite, and that cravenous appetite leading itself to indiscretion when making decisions that affect the entire community. So because of that, a king only being allowed a modest number of wives, so that he has further concentration and ability to focus on the whole of the community, the well-being of the whole of the community, making decisions that are prudent for the whole of the community. So again, this is Devarim chapter 17, verse 14 a 17. Deuteronomy chapter 17, verse 14 through 17. When you come to the land that Elohim your God is giving you, and you possess it and live therein, and you say, I will set a king over myself, like all the nations around me, you shall set a king over you, one whom Elohim your God chooses from amongst your brothers. You shall set a king over yourself. You shall not appoint a foreigner over yourself, one who is not your brother. Only he may not acquire many horses for himself, so that he will not bring the people back to Egypt in order to acquire many horses. For Elohim said to you, you shall not return that way any further. And he shall not take many wives for himself, and his heart must not turn away, and he shall not acquire much silver and gold for himself. So again, it's the very pragmatics. There's permissibility, but then there are rules within the actuality as well. Within that permissibility, it's not just a matter of a man doing whatever he wants and flaunting or whatever else. There's a purposefulness within the entirety of it. And then the final passage for this particular section is also from Devarim chapter 21, verse 10 through 14. 10 a 14. Okay. We're getting into a little bit of the details here. So, amidst the rules of a man having further than one wife, there's just again the practicality of the actuality of the conditions whereby a man, when the nation is involved in conflict with other nations and captures people from other nations, making slaves, and additionally, one of the factors in it is a man being able to take slave women from the people who are captured. But at the same time, it's not just a matter of him doing whatever he wants. He has to abide by rules. So this is part of the this is part of the actuality. It's some of the nitty gritty, and it's actually applicable to today's circumstances. Recognizing the many different natures of warfare today, the many different natures of captivity and subservience, and additionally. And so this is just another rule, giving the context and description about the experience and practice and discipline concerning a man having multiple wives. So this is again Devarim 21, verse 10 a 14, chapter 21, verse 10 through 14 from Deuteronomy. If you go out to war against your enemies, and Elohim your God will deliver him into your hands, and you take his captives, and you see amongst the captives a beautiful woman, and you desire her, you may take her for yourself as a wife. You shall bring her into your home, and she shall shave her head and let her nails grow. And she shall remove the garment of her captivity from upon herself, and stay in your house, and weep for her far and her more for a full month. After that you may be intimate with her and possess her, and she shall be a wife for you. And it will be, if you do not desire her, then you shall send her away wherever she wishes, but you shall not sell her for money. You shall not keep her as a servant, because you have afflicted her. So that concludes this section concerning multiple wives. We get into the third section that addresses the experience of divorce and adultery and corruption and the other types of lascivious things. So in actuality, I'm actually supposed to share something before we actually at in the first section that I omitted. So I'm going to share that here. In the rules that Moshe Rabbeinu establishes concerning marriage. Actually, I'm going to do a mic check to see if this is still recording, because I'm looking at the text. It looks like it's still recording, so glory, hallelujah. All right. So when Moshe Rabbeinu establishes the law and reminds the children of Israel what the covenant is, the way of being in this life, the rules of righteousness, proper behavior, and additionally, and particularly as it pertains to marriage, relationship between man and woman. Again, the Ten Commandments are a well-known foundation of those mitzvot. There are actually 613, 613 mitzvot that apply to all different aspects of life. A significant amount, and also particularly involves marriage and proper relationship between man and a woman. It goes into very details. It goes into very significant details about whom a man is able to marry, whom a woman is able to marry, in terms of avoiding incest, even being prohibited from marrying a sister, two sisters together, or even a mother and a daughter together. Prohibition of a man and a man having a relationship, prohibition against cross-dressing and other types of things, prohibition against bestiality. It gets into a lot of different details. It talks about, again, avoiding harlotry and prostitution, and what are the consequences of the violations of all of these guidances, these rules, these mitzvot. And so that's some of the details. It also goes into details about a man's emission of semen, what are the implications of that, recognizing the sanctity of his life force, and when that's expelled, there being necessary protocols about cleanliness and further along those lines. Similarly with women's menstruation, that's all part of the relationship between man and woman, and that's specifically detailed within the Torah about how to behave and how to respond to these experiences in life. Then the basic notions of cleanliness, how to cleanse oneself after having these experiences, the experiences of disease, affliction, and how to proceed towards healing from these. Specific rules concerning divorce. The Moshe Rabbeinu in the laws establishes the protocols of separation between a husband and wife, and there being involved processes and procedures in that respect, but it's established within the law of Moshe Rabbeinu. And then also the rules again of cleaning, but also as a part of the cleansing process and the redemptive process, there's also the korban, making an offering to God, to Elohim, and returning into the normal experience of life within the community accordingly, after going through whatever trials and tribulations precede that experience. So those are some of the details. Again, it's a whole lot, and it's prohibitive of reciting or even citing all the different passages, because it's many. So going on to the third section, as I mentioned before, presuming that this audio is taking. So this third section is specifically addressing adultery, and adultery in one respect, but also corruption of the flesh and additional experiences in that respect. So again, I have to look at the citations. So the first section that I shared was basically all in chronological sequence, and the second section, is also in chronological sequence, listing all the different occasions, or some of the different occasions of a man having multiple wives in the Torah. And now, in doing a review, actually this is all. Okay. I think this is all also in chronological sequence, and again, it's giving like the progression of the experiences from the point of creation, and the beginning of relationship and the narrative, and then the different occasions of marriage on the first section, the subsequent occasions of a marriage of a man with further than one wife, and then now. This is the sequence of the corruption of flesh, the corruption of adultery, of life on this earth, in getting into the hedonism, excesses, selfishness, delusions, and additionally. So, now this begins with what is referred to in Christianity as the original sin. This is the narrative of the garden and the serpent. So this is chapter 3 within Bereshit, otherwise known as Genesis. And I'm reading the entire chapter. This is uno a... Alright, it's uno a 24. So it's a little bit of a passage here. So here we go. So if you recall the preceding, this immediately follows from the passage that I previously read that describes, now they were both naked, the man and his wife, but they were not ashamed. That was the conclusion of chapter 2. Now we begin immediately with chapter 3, with verse 1. Now the serpent was cunning further than all the beasts of the field that Elohim God had made. And it said to the woman, did Elohim indeed say, you shall not eat of any of the trees of the garden? And the woman said to the serpent, of the fruit of the trees of the garden we may eat, but of the fruit of the tree that is in the midst of the garden, Elohim said, you shall not eat of it, and you shall not touch it, lest you die. And the serpent said to the woman, you shall surely not die. For Elohim knows that on the day that you eat thereof, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like angels, knowing benevolence and evil. And the woman saw that the tree was beneficial for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and the tree was desirable to make one wise. So she took of its fruit, and she ate, and she gave also to her husband with her, and he ate. And the eyes of both of them were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves and made themselves girdles. And they heard the voice of Elohim God going in the garden to the direction of the Soleil. And the man and his wife hid from before Elohim God in the midst of the trees of the garden. And Elohim God called to man, and Elohim said to him, where are you? And he said, I heard your voice in the garden, and I was afraid because I am naked, so I hid. And Elohim said, who told you that you are naked? Have you eaten from the tree of which I commanded you not to eat? And the man said, the woman whom you gave to be with me, she gave me of the tree, so I ate. And Elohim God said to the woman, what is this that you have done? And the woman said, the serpent enticed me, and I ate. And Elohim God said to the serpent, because you have done this, cursed be you further than all the cattle and further than all the beasts of the field. You shall walk on your belly, and you shall eat dust all the days of your life. And I shall place hatred between you and between the woman, and between your seed and between her seed. He will crush your head, and you will bite his heel. To the woman, Elohim said, I shall surely increase your sorrow and your pregnancy. In pain you shall bear children, and to your husband will be your desire, and he will rule over you. And to man, Elohim said, because you listened to your wife, and you ate from the tree from which I commanded you, saying, you shall not eat of it. Cursed be the ground for your sake, which with toil shall you eat of it all the days of your life. And it will cause thorns and thistles to grow for you, and you shall eat of the herbs of the field. With the sweat of your face you shall eat bread until you return to the ground, for you were taken therefrom. For dust you are, and to dust you will return. And the man named his wife Eve, because she was the more of all life. And Elohim God made for Adam and for his wife shirts of skin, and Elohim dressed them. Now Elohim God said, behold, man has become like one of us, having the ability of knowing benevolence and evil. And now lest he stretch forth his hand and take also from the tree of life and eat and live forever. And Elohim God sent him out of the garden of Eden to till the soil whence he had been taken. And Elohim drove the man out, and Elohim stationed from the east of the garden of Eden the cherubim and the blade of the revolving sword to guard the way to the tree of life. That ends the chapter. And actually the other passage that I read before about the man knew his wife Eve, and she conceived and bore Cain, that's the beginning of the first children. That's immediate following with chapter 4, verse 1. So that puts some context in terms of the narrative. And again, this is the description of, again, within Christianity, the original sin does not exist within Israel as a doctrine. And that is something that is established after or later on within the progression of the history and narrative of Christianity. So there is this narrative. It does have it's huge and extremely dense. And there's so much to talk about it, but in terms of just recognizing the corruption of the flesh, some focal points is that the commandment not to eat from the tree of knowledge is actually given to Adam. It's not communicated directly to Eve. Adam communicates it to Eve, and then Eve relates it back to the serpent in that conversation that is included in the passage. Now there's an understanding of the serpent, who the serpent is, and additionally, but that's a little bit of a sidetrack at the moment. I won't get into the details of that because that would involve commentary and further reasoning. So for the moment, it's the nature of the relationship. Now, the person at fault is Adam, because he was the one to whom the commandment is given. Regardless of what his wife says, he talks with Elohim. So he committed a violation in that relationship. And again, communication is an essential thing with this, because it's actually a series of one-to-one communications and conversations. And it's beneficial to recognize that, because it involves multiple people, multiple parties, at least cuatro. But in that sequence, there's only one-to-one communication throughout that entire sequence. And that's beneficial to recognize in terms of the communication and the nature of the relationship between man and woman. And one other thing also that's beneficial to recognize is that at what point does the serpent actually lie? Because the serpent actually deceives through honesty, and that's appropriate to recognize. This is a side note a little bit, because I see something that I have seen for the first occasion. But when the serpent describes that Adam and Eve will be like angels, will be like angels. How about this? The consideration that Adam and Eve are already angels, and it's only in becoming aware of it that it is distanced, and it's a matter of what used to be, and you only finding out after the fact, after it's gone. You don't know what you have till it's gone. Joni Mitchell. And ancient wisdom. So that's part of the nature of knowledge, wara, and then it's a matter of continual reconciliation from that. So in the experience of the garden, returning to Shuva. So anyway, that's a little bit of additional commentary in this joint. It feels much longer than the usual joints, but it's not even an hour yet. What's going on? All right, that would be Marvin Gaye. So we're still continuing. That was just the first part. That was the first passage for this third section. This is the crux of it, yo. This is of what we're sharing today. This is like the formidable portion of what we're sharing. It should be comparatively expedient from the completion of this section. So let's just start. Again, continuing on with the next section, we're talking about the corruption of the flesh. So we had the experience of the garden, and we had the violation of within the communication. And then it gets further distance, it gets further involved, it gets further corrupt, and so as another context later on in the narrative, when the lineage from Adam and Eve is described, at some point in that lineage, this is the passage that describes the experience of other beings. One referred to as Nephilim. We can perceive these as angels, as mighty beings of this earth, and there's all different types of descriptions about the demi status or semi status between these types of beings and the human beings that from the lineage of Adam and Eve. But this is one of the experiences as a precursor to the further corruption that later occurs within the narrative of life on earth and in this universe. So this is part of the description here. This is chapter 6, verse 1 a 8. Chapter 6, verse 1 through 8 in Bereshit, Genesis. Hey, what? I don't have a phone. And it came to pass when man commenced to multiply upon the face of the earth, and daughters were born to them, that the sons of the nobles saw the daughters of man when they were beautifying themselves, and took for themselves wives from whomever they chose. And Elohim said, Let my spirit not quarrel forever concerning man, because he is also flesh, and his days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of the nobles would come to the daughters of man, and they would bear for them. They are the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. And Elohim saw that the evil of man was great in the earth, and every imagination of his heart was only evil all the time. And Elohim regretted that Elohim had made man on the earth, and Elohim became grieved in Elohim's heart. And Elohim said, I will blot out man, whom I created, from upon the face of the earth, from man to cattle, to creeping thing, to the fowl of the heavens, for I regret that I made them. But Noah found favor in the eyes of Elohim. So this is what begins the narrative of the flood occurring because of the corruption of the flesh of man. It's described as robbery, it's described as corruption of the flesh, consumption of the flesh, and so that involves the carnal relations amongst man, and the consequences of that. And so this is the continuation. The next passage, chapter 6, 9 a 13, chapter 6, 9 a 13, 6 chapters 9 through 7, verse 9 through 13. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man. He was perfect. In his generations, Noah walked with God, with Elohim. Joint's about to let out now. It looks like. Let me focus on here. All right. Again, reading starting from the beginning. These are the generations of Noah. Noah was a righteous man. He was perfect in his generations. Noah walked with Elohim. And Noah begot 3 sons, Shem, Ham, and Yafet. Now the earth was corrupt before Elohim, and the earth became full of robbery. And Elohim saw the earth, and behold, it had become corrupted, for all flesh had corrupted its way on the earth. And Elohim said to Noah, The end of all flesh has come before me, for the earth has become full of robbery because of them. And behold, I am destroying them from the earth. I'll continue with it. Make for yourself an ark of gopher wood. You shall make the ark with compartments, and you shall caulk it both inside and outside with pitch. And that concludes the passage. So again, this is the flood. This is the ark of Noah, and the ark established to preserve life, to bring 2 of each species, man and woman, male and female from each species, to continue life on the earth of each of the species. So again, it's the methodology of the wiping out of mankind. Noah was righteous, and for that reason, he is identified for continuing on the lineage of life on this earth. So that is the passage precipitating that precedes that experience, that narrative. Again, we're talking about the experience of corruption, the consequence of corruption, and we're still in Bereshit here, I think. Aha, yes, all right. What, okay. right, so this is specifically talking about Sodom and Gomorrah, the well-known story about the corruption of flesh, the Sodomites within Sodom and Gomorrah, the waywardness, the delusion, just the buck wildness. And because of that, instead of the flood on this occasion, it's the raining of fire and brimstone upon Sodom and Gomorrah. And so this is the beginning of the description of that narrative, of that sequence. This is coming from Bereshit, chapter 18, verse 20 a 21. Yo. All right. And Elohim said, since the cry of Sodom and Gomorrah has become great, and since their sin has become very grave, I will descend now and see whether according to her cry which has come to me they have done. I will wreak destruction upon them, and if not, I will know. So that is, again, another iteration of the corruption of flesh and the consequence of the corruption of flesh. The intention here is not to be preachy or soapboxy. It's just a matter of describing, the conditions. There's an absence of specific rules that are articulated at this point. This is all part of the narrative, the lineage of the creation. The rules particularly are established through Moshe Rabbeinu a number of generations later. All right, this is the final passage for this section. And the specific topic here is seduction. And again, we're talking about adultery and the consequences of adultery. A man losing himself through committing adultery. And the significant dangers, not just for himself, but for an entire community when that experience is normalized. When women are able to lure and tempt men away from who they are, literally from who they are, what they know, they should be, losing the relationship with God because of the intoxication of that seduction, the powers of allure within a woman towards a man. All right, so this is interesting. Okay, this is Bamidbar. All right, this is Bamidbar, chapter 25, 1 a 3. That's Numbers chapter 25, 1 through 3. Israel settled in Shittim, and the people began to commit harlotry with the daughters of the Moabites. They invited the people to the sacrifices of their deities, and the people ate and prostrated themselves to their deities. Israel became attached to Baal Peor, and the anger of Elohim flared against Israel. Again, just addressing that experience of corruption, losing one's way, becoming wayward, and further. So that's wraps up our recitation of teachings from Torah specifically. All right, peace and blessings to you, brother. How you doing? All right. And so now, that's also concluding our summary concerning the teachings from Israel. Now we go into the Christian teachings, or the teachings that Jesus provides. I may be going right a few steps behind me to the tree because the sprinkles keep going on, and it's very slight, but still, it's of concern. All right. Now we're back on script. We're back on track now. Okay. So the first one, we're going into the teachings of Jesus. Now this is what Jesus teaches specifically concerning marriage. Now the summary of this is that Jesus affirms the laws that Moshe Rabbeinu establishes. So that's what Jesus, and this is included within one of the passages here. Jesus affirms marriage, and I'll just say the summary. Jesus affirms marriage. Doesn't address at all specifically, directly, the experience of a man having multiple wives. Doesn't address it yay or nay either way. He affirms directly marriage. He affirms the laws of Moshe Rabbeinu, and he actually forgives adultery. He doesn't condone it. He says it's wrong not to do it. But there's a very powerful narrative in the book of the Gospel according to St. John, about a woman found in adultery, and Jesus having forgiveness for her, but at the same time saying, yo, stop, don't do it any further. So that's the response that Jesus has specifically towards adultery. And then, but at the same time, Jesus also categorically, explicitly prohibits divorce. No divorce, not allowed. It's like committing adultery. Marriage is for life. And then even further, Jesus also teaches a very quiet guidance of celibacy for those who have ears to hear. And so that's what these passages are articulating here. The first passage is actually a continuation of the lineage from Avraham Avinu to Jesus. So even Jesus exists within that lineage of be fruitful and multiply. That continuing narrative of that flesh and bone and blood narrative from creation is established, is part of establishing the authority and the presence and the walk and the ministry of Jesus himself. So that is what is articulated here, and all these passages are coming from Matthew, except for the one that I mentioned from John. And whatever critics are for just looking at Matthew, to be honest, it's that superficial criticism that I'll articulate or that I'll address preemptively, anyways. So all these come from Matthew, except for John, the one passage from John. So we begin with Matthew chapter 1, 1 a 25. Matthew chapter 1, verse 1 through 25. This is the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Avraham. Avraham was the father of Yitzhak, Yitzhak the father of Yaakov, Yaakov the father of Yehuda and his brothers. Yehuda the father of Perez and Zerah, whose mother was Tamar, Perez the father of Hezron, Hezron the father of Ram. Ram the father of Aminadab, Aminadab the father of Nashon, Nashon the father of Salmon. Salmon the father of Boaz, whose mother was Rahab, Boaz the father of Obed, whose mother was Ruth, Obed the father of Yesi. And Yesi the father of King David. David was the father of Solomon, whose mother had been Uriah's wife. Solomon the father of Rehoboam, Rehoboam the father of Abiyah, Abiyah the father of Asa, Asa the father of Jehoshaphat, Jehoshaphat the father of Jehoram the father of Uzziah, Uzziah the father of Yotam, Yotam the father of Ahaz, Ahaz the father of Hezekiah, Hezekiah the father of Manasseh, Manasseh the father of Ammon, Ammon the father of Josiah, and Josiah the father of Jehoniah and his brothers at the time of the exile to Babylon. After the exile to Babylon, Jehoniah was the father of Shealtiel, Shealtiel the father of Zerubbabel, Zerubbabel the father of Abihud, Abihud the father of Eliakim, Eliakim the father of Azor, Azor the father of Zadok, Zadok the father of Akim, Akim the father of Elihud, Elihud the father of Eleazar, Eleazar the father of Matan, Matan the father of Yaakov, and Yaakov the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary, and Mary was the mother of Jesus, who is called the Messiah. Thus were 14 generations in all from Abraham to David, 14 from David to the exile to Babylon, and 14 from the exile to the Messiah. This is how the birth of Jesus the Messiah came about. His mother Mary was pledged to be married to Joseph, but before they came together, she was found to be pregnant through the Holy Spirit. Because Joseph, her husband, was faithful to the law and yet did not want to expose her to public disgrace, he had in mind to divorce her quietly. But after he had considered this, an angel of God, an angel of Elohim, appeared to him in a dream and said, Joseph, son of David, do not be afraid to take Mary home as your wife, because what is conceived in her is from the Holy Spirit. She will give birth to a son, and you are to give him the name Jesus, because he will save his people from their sins. All this took place to fulfill what God had said through the prophet. The virgin will conceive and give birth to a son, and they will call him Emmanuel, which means God with us. And Joseph woke up, and he did what the angel of God had commanded him, and took Mary home as his wife. But he did not consummate their marriage until she gave birth to a son, and he gave him the name Jesus. So again, it's the confirmation of the lineage from which Jesus is born, affirming again marriage and be fruitful and multiply. Continuing on to the next passage is Matthew chapter 5, 17 a 20. So here Jesus is in his ministry, and again he explicitly affirms the law of Moshe Rabbeinu. And so it reads here, Matthew 5, 17 through 20. Do not think that I have come to abolish the law or the prophets. I have not come to abolish them, but to fulfill them. For truly I tell you, until heaven and earth disappear, not the smallest letter, not the least stroke of a pen will by any means disappear from the law until everything is accomplished. Therefore, anyone who sets aside one of the least of these commands and teaches others accordingly will be called least in the sovereignty of heaven. But whoever practices and teaches these commands will be called great in the sovereignty of heaven. For I tell you that unless your righteousness surpasses that of the Pharisees and the teachers of the law, you will certainly not enter the sovereignty of heaven. So again, all the laws, all the details that Moshe Rabbeinu establishes in the Torah, Jesus specifically, explicitly, directly affirms. he has come to fulfill the law of Moshe Rabbeinu. So there is that. Continuing on to Matthew chapter 19, verse 1 through 6, 19, 1 through 6. So now we're getting into the topic of divorce. And in talking about divorce, Jesus actually affirms the institution of marriage. So again, this is the beginning of the sequence. There's a lot in this sequence, and this is segmented up. This passage is pretty much what we have to share in Jesus' guidance concerning marriage. Interspersed within this segmentation, we're including the passage from the Gospel of John, specifically dealing with adultery. But first we have here Jesus affirms the institution of marriage. Again, Matthew 19:1-6. Matthew chapter 19, verse 1 through 6. When Jesus had finished saying these things, he left Galilee and went into the region of Judea to the other side of the Jordan. Large crowds followed him, and he healed them there. Some Pharisees came to test him. They asked, "Is it lawful for a man to divorce his wife for any and every reason?" "Haven't you read," he replied, "that at the beginning the Creator made them male and female, and said, for this reason a man will leave his father and mother and be united to his wife, and the two will become one flesh. So they are no longer two, but one flesh. Therefore, what God has joined together, let no one separate." So right there, again, that's the conclusion of the passage. Right there, Jesus is affirming marriage, affirming the marital bond between a man and a woman, becoming one flesh, having a child, bringing new life into this world. And that's very contrary to the notion of the original sin. I'm going to leave the commentary aside for the moment, but there's that. Now we get into, again, the issue of adultery specifically. And one of the incidents that Jesus responds to concerning adultery specifically, without saying a specific doctrine, much of what Jesus shares is exactly through what he does, and leading by example. So again, we have here John 8:1-11. John chapter 8, verse 1 through 11. But Jesus went to the Mount of Olives. At dawn he appeared again in the temple courts, where all the people gathered around him, and he sat down to teach them. The teachers of the law and the Pharisees brought in a woman caught in adultery. They made her stand before the group and said to Jesus, "Teacher, this woman we caught in the act of adultery. In the law Moshe commanded us to stone such women. Now what do you say?" They were utilizing this question as a trap in order to have a basis for accusing him. But Jesus bent down and started to write on the ground with his finger. When they kept on questioning him, he straightened up and said to them, "Let any one of you who is without sin be the first to throw a stone at her." Again he stooped down and wrote on the ground. At this, those who heard began to go away one at a time, the older ones first, until only Jesus was left, with the woman still standing there. Jesus straightened up and asked her, "Woman, where are they? Has no one condemned you?" "No one, sir," she said. "Then neither do I condemn you," Jesus declared. "Go now and leave your life of sin." So, again, tremendous understanding, forgiveness, but at the same time, not acceptance of the behavior and guidance to improve the behavior. So we go back now to the same sequence that Jesus is addressing the issue of marriage, divorce, and further about just the entire experience of marriage, and segment by segment. So this next segment is verse 7-9, and it's specifically going into, again, the details or further insight concerning specifically divorce. And it reads again, Matthew 19:7-9. "Why then," they asked, "did Moshe command that a man give his wife a certificate of divorce and send her away?" Jesus replied, "Moshe permitted you to divorce your wives because your hearts were hard, but it was not this way from the beginning. I tell you that anyone who divorces his wife except for sexual indecency and marries another woman commits adultery." That concludes this part of the passage. So again, Jesus explains that Moshe Rabbeinu was somewhat further relaxed in allowing divorce, much like we can look at the children of Israel complaining about the food and wanting all these other things, these delicacies, and additionally, and actually being punished, being provided with delicacies, manna of the field, and additionally flesh to eat, because being bored and tired of eating the manna every day. And so then having flesh, but then having so much flesh, it becoming excessive and vomiting and becoming sick and ill because of eating that flesh. So there are numerous occasions of that when there's the rebellion amongst the children of Israel, because it's very difficult to lead a life of discipline when being accustomed to a life of not discipline. So that's what Jesus is articulating here concerning specifically the guidance concerning divorce. Now that's something to reason about that experience, but that's just what Jesus teaches for those within the Christian faith concerning divorce specifically. And the teachings continue on concerning marriage. And this is for those who have ears to hear, where Jesus proclaims his doctrine of celibacy. Again, he doesn't say this is everybody has to practice this. He says for those who are spiritually awakened and are inclined to practice celibacy, that is beneficial because it gives clearness of mind and further. And so this is, again, continuing on, still the same sequence in Matthew chapter 19. This is verse 10 through 13, 10 a 13. The disciple said to him, "If this is the situation between a husband and wife, it is better not to marry." Jesus replied, "Not everyone can accept this word, but only those to whom it has been given. For there are eunuchs who are born that way, and there are eunuchs who have been made eunuchs by others, and there are those who choose to live like eunuchs for the sake of the sovereignty of heaven. The one who can accept this should accept it." Then people brought little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and pray for them, but the disciples rebuked them. Actually, that's actually continuing into the next segment we have available. So that concludes this section. Again, we're actually concluding this with verse 12. So just the articulation of celibacy, and we're continuing on with the same passage, the chapters, the next verses 13 through 14, because even after explicitly, quietly proclaiming a doctrine of celibacy, then their children brought before Jesus, and the disciples initially rebuked the parents for bringing their children. Just seeing the parents as wanting trying to get their children ahead and get some favor by getting some energy and some charisma from Jesus. But Jesus says to his disciples, don't hinder them. Bring the children to me. And Jesus confers those blessings upon the children. And he says that the children are children of God as well. The sovereignty of heaven belongs to the children as well. So it is right to share the blessings that Jesus has to the children as well. And so in doing this, Jesus again affirms the very first mitzvah, be fruitful and multiply. That even though he just says about celibacy for those who have ears to hear, at the same time, for those who have ears to hear, those ones still promote and support the experience of parents and marriage and children and family. So even though kinfolk are practicing celibacy, those celibate kinfolk have a responsibility for promoting family life on this earth and attending and supporting the children that are brought into the families in a righteous way. And so that is what is begun here in the next verse, again continuing exactly from the same sequence. This is 19 verse 13 a 14, 13 through 14. Then people brought little children to Jesus for him to place his hands on them and pray for them, but the disciples rebuked them. Jesus said, "Let the little children come to me and do not hinder them, for the sovereignty of heaven belongs to such as these." Now, this is a little bit of an extra, the next passage, and this concludes the passages that we have from Christianity. But again, it kind of brings things full circle, because exactly after this happens, another person approaches Jesus, as is the case. People just flock to Jesus, and like all these narratives come one after the other. So after Jesus talks about divorce, then he talks about celibacy, then he heals the children, and then a particular person asks him about entering heaven, about receiving the sovereignty of heaven. And so this is what Jesus responds accordingly. And again, in here, there is both the affirmation of life, because he's speaking to a son of God. He's speaking to a child who walks in the righteous way, but has yet to experience that heightened spiritual awakening that brethren is looking for. So Jesus acknowledges the man, addresses him, answers him, but even in answering him, invites him to walk the same path that Jesus himself is walking. And describes the challenge that the man has for not doing that, because he has a lot of money, he has a lot of riches, and even though he's fair and nice and everything, it's very difficult for him to let those riches go. And so Jesus talks about how when those who do have those types of riches on this earth, it's very difficult for such to receive the sovereignty of heaven, because such people are so severely attached to the earthly experiences and the material experiences. So that's what is articulated here in this passage, and it kind of puts things into context. And again, like I said, full circle. And this is a concluding part of the passage of the entirety concerning marriage, the beginning part of the conversation. So again, on Matthew 19:15 through 24, 19:15-24. When he had placed his hands on them, he went on from there. Just then a man came up to Jesus and asked, "Teacher, what benevolent thing must I do to get eternal life? What holy thing must I do to get eternal life?" "Why do you ask me about what is holy?" Jesus replied, "There is only one who is holy. If you want to enter life, keep the commandments." "Which ones?" he inquired. Jesus replied, "You should not murder, you should not commit adultery, you should not steal, you should not give false testimony, honor your father and more, and love your neighbor as yourself." "All these I have kept," the young man said. "What do I still lack?" Jesus answered, "If you want to be perfect, go sell your possessions and give to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come, follow me." When the young man heard this, he went away sad because he had great wealth. Then Jesus said to his disciples, "Truly I tell you, it is hard for someone who is rich to enter the sovereignty of heaven. Again, I tell you, it is easy for a camel to go through the eye of a needle than for someone who is rich to enter the sovereignty of God." So that concludes this passage. And again, even in this response, Jesus exactly refers back to the laws of Moshe Rabbeinu as an answer to the question that's posed to him. He recites the same 10 commandments, this passage from the 10 commandments that is shared here in this joint a few minutes ago. So again, full circle. Now that concludes what we share in terms of the passages from Christianity, particularly from what Jesus teaches concerning marriage. What we get into concerning Paul is another circumstance, and it's beneficial to recognize that. So this is what Jesus teaches explicitly, directly within the Gospels of Christianity, and it's in direct response to Torah, the laws of Moshe Rabbeinu, and that it's very beneficial to recognize that, and it's beneficial to concentrate upon that. So now that being said, now we're going to go into the teachings from the Quran. And again, similar to the laws of Moshe Rabbeinu, the Quran gives a lot of details about marriage, about relationship between man and woman, husband and wife, about reconciliation, about methodologies of separation, about mediation amongst family members, about inheritance, and further. And much of it is very commensurate and congruent with what is taught in Torah. Some of it is somewhat nuanced and distinct in terms of some of the details. But that's the nature of it. And so again, rather than going to all the different details that the Quran stipulates concerning marriage between a man and a woman, we share this as a basic foundational teaching. This comes from Surah An-Nisa, which is the 4th surah in the Quran, which is actually revealed towards the latter part of the revelations of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And so again, this is one of the foundational teachings about relationship between man and woman, husband and wife. And it explicitly permits a man having multiple wives, but recognizing explicitly, stating that it's beneficial for a man just to have one wife. There's an element of celibacy here, although it's very nuanced and subtle. And this is the beginning of the surah, so it's verse 1 through 6. Uno a seis. I mentioned before, I say a blessing when I begin this. I did not record it. I will say it here, particularly because this is part of the protocol when reading specifically from the Quran. There are specific protocols when reading from Torah as well, and additionally, but I'm saying it specifically here within the Quran because it's a long time, over an hour ago, since I said the prayer and blessing, and I did not record it, so I'm just sharing it here as part of the protocol. So, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. In the name of Allah, most gracious, most merciful. O mankind, reverence your guardian Lord, who created you from a single person, created you of like nature, his mate, and from them twain scattered like seeds, countless men and women. Reverence Allah, through whom ye demand your mutual rights, and reverence the wombs that bore you, for Allah ever watches over you. To orphans restore their property when they reach their age, nor substitute your worthless things for their beneficial ones, and devour not their substance by mixing it up with your own. For this is indeed a great sin. If ye fear that ye shall not be able to deal justly with the orphans, marry women of your choice, 2 or 3 or 4. But if ye fear that ye shall not be able to deal justly with them, then only one, or a captive that your right hands possess. That will be further suitable to prevent you from doing injustice. And give the women on marriage their dower as a free gift. But if they of their own beneficial pleasure remit any part of it to you, take it and enjoy it with right benevolent cheer. To those weak of understanding, make not over your property, which Allah hath made a means of support for you, but feed and clothe them therewith, and speak to them words of kindness and justice. Make trial of orphans until they reach the age of marriage. If then ye find sound judgment in them, release their property to them, but consume it not wastefully, nor in haste against their growing up. If the guardian is well off, let him claim no remuneration, but if he is poor, let him have for himself what is just and reasonable. When ye release their property to them, take witnesses in their presence. But all sufficient is Allah in taking account. So again, that's a general summation of the guidance concerning marriage. There's much further detail, and there's many teachings and guidance within the Quran specifically about the topic of marriage. But again, on the topic generally of marriage and a man having 2 wives, that is foundational teaching from Islam. So now we go into the teachings from Buddhism. And again, as a general summary concerning the teachings from the Buddha, first of all, again, the Buddha teaches celibacy. The Buddha practices celibacy. It's not even a question. It's not subtle. That's what the Buddha describes. The highest path of spiritual awakening is attained through celibacy. That's what the Buddha teaches. It's not a doctrine. It's not a necessity. It's not. There's still the provision of marriage. The Buddha does not outlaw marriage. He just says for those who are inclined towards the spiritual path, celibacy is the path. So that's what the Buddha teaches. It's not necessary. There's no original sin. There's no ridicule or admonishment of people living the household life. The householders are the ones who support those who live the celibate life, the monastic life, the beggar's bowl. So that's part of the tradition of India during the time the Buddha emerges on this earth over 2,000 years ago. So that's the established culture and protocol. So plain and simple, that the path that the Buddha prescribes specifically for the spiritually awakened is celibacy. Marriage is perfectly acceptable for those who have that inclination and guidance. So, and very often part of the protocol and culture within India for the sadhu is a man being married, being a householder, having a wife, having children, raising children, and then when there's self-sufficiency, then going on to become a celibate, a renunciate, a sadhu, and living that life of spiritual awakening. So that is part of the culture that the Buddha is describing, and it's plain and simple. Now that being said, there are 3 passages here. Actually 4. There are 4 passages. There are 3 basic topics. One talks about the challenges that exist within marriage, the discrimination, and like the whole valuations and everything else that exists, particularly the false valuations that exist within marriage, and part of the hindrances in living up to those discriminations, those false valuations before marriage as well as after marriage, keeping up with the Joneses, and conditioning and training children to continue on in that thing in terms of finding marital prospects for children. So that's just what the Buddha describes. Now, and then again, the next passage talks about the specific discipline concerning the relationship between men and women. Now, if I remember to say this, well, I'll say it now that whilst I think about it. Even after the Buddha gives this recommendation about how men should interact with the bhikshus, how the celibate monks should interact with women, even in saying this, the Buddha himself talks with women. So it's not a hard, fast prohibition and violation. It's just a guidance. It's always a matter about being mindful. The third section of this subsection addresses the actual life of the Buddha. The Buddha himself is married before he gives on the spiritual life. He has a wife. He has a son. And the life of Siddhartha Gautama as a prince is one of lavishness, of riches, and we can glean from that example that he actually has other female servants with whom he has relations. He articulates this through the adage of other bodhisattvas before himself that have many wives, and that's what these latter passages speak to. That experience of men having multiple wives, kings particularly having multiple wives, and then from that experience going on to have a spiritual awakening and then becoming renunciants, becoming celibate monks. So that's what the concluding two passages here articulate. So again, we go with the first one that talks about the nature of marriage, the discrimination, and what the genuine priorities are. So this is from the Ambatas. All of these come from the Digha Nikaya, the long discourses of the Buddha. The first one comes from the Ambata Sutta, which is the third sutta, chapter 2, verse 1, and it says this. And again, the speaker initially is a student who is asking Gautama, the Buddha, a question. But what, Gautama, is the righteousness and what the wisdom spoken of in that verse? The Buddha responds, in the supreme perfection in wisdom and righteousness, Ambata, there is no reference to the question either of birth or of lineage, or of the pride which says you are held as worthy as I, or you are not held as worthy as I. It is where the talk is of marrying or of giving in marriage that reference is made to such things as that. For whosoever, Ambata, are in bondage to the notions of birth or of lineage or to the pride of social position or of connection by marriage, they are distant from the best wisdom and righteousness. It is only by having got rid of such bondage that one can realize for himself that supreme perfection in wisdom and in conduct. So that concludes this passage. And the Buddha is specifically referring to how people look at people's lineage, where they come from, their background, do they come from a decent family. Now there's practical wisdom with that as well, to discern what a person's behavior and principles are. But a lot of times it becomes superficial, of just like ticking off boxes of whether somebody belongs in the right class or not, or whether somebody has the superficial characteristics of nice looks or other things like that. And so that's what the Buddha is addressing here. So continuing on, this is another conversation between one of the bhikshu students of the Buddha and the Buddha himself, as he's preparing to experience Nibbana, to leave the Sangha, and giving the last advice to his students. This is coming from the Mahaparinibbana Sutta that narrates this sequence of the Buddha's attainment of Nibbana. This is the 16 Sutta, which is 16, chapter 5, verse 9, 5-9, verse 9. How, Reverend Sir, are we to act in regard to women? As though they were not seen, Ananda. But when seeing them, Reverend Sir, how are we to act? Without conversing, Ananda. But when conversing, Reverend Sir, how are we to act? You should attend to mindfulness, Ananda. And that concludes this passage. So, again, plain and simple. It's not a hard, fast avoidance or a rule against. It's always about being mindful and taking the steps to avoid temptation as much as possible. And then when being in direct communication, being purposeful and providing guidance. That's what the Buddha himself does when having a number of conversations with women during his ministry, during his sharing the Dhamma. So continuing on, again, now we're talking about some of the narratives of preceding princes that become bodhisattvas and later attain Nibbana. So the first one comes from the Mahapadana Sutta, which is the number 15, 15. It's chapter 1, verse 33 a 38. And this is referring to a person who's born with a baby who's born to a king, and the baby has the markings of prominence, and the king instead of wanting the son to become a monk, he wants the son to become a righteous king like himself, and so bestows all these treasures on the son in order to corrupt him, to be able to be attached to and beholden to the king himself for guidance and tutelage, to become later on a king on the son's self. So that's what's described here. So again, it begins with verse 33. Endowed to my master, as is this babe, with these 32 marks of the great man, 2 careers and none other are open to him. Thereupon, either there's a redaction here, so either attainment of Nibbana or the life of a righteous king. Thereupon Banduman the Raja, brethren, let the Brahmin soothsayers be invested with new robes and gratified their every desire. And Banduman the Raja, brethren, engaged nurses for the babe Vipassi. Some suckled him, some washed him, and some nursed him, some carried him about on their hip, and a white canopy was held over him day and night, for it was commanded, let not cold or heat or straws or dust or dew annoy him. And the boy Vipassi, brethren, became the darling and the beloved of the people, even as a blue or red or white lotus is dear to and beloved of all, so that he was literally carried about from lap to lap. And when the boy Vipassi was born, brethren, he had a lovely voice, was well modulated and sweet and charming, just as the voice of the Karyavaka bird in the mountains of Himalaya is lovely and sweetly modulated and charming. And when the boy Vipassi was born, brethren, there was manifested in him the heavenly eye, born of the result of his karma, by the which verily he could see as distant as a league by day and eke by night. And when the boy Vipassi was born, brethren, he looked forward with unblinking eyes like the angels in the heaven of delight. Now it was because of this, because people exclaiming Vipassi, Vipassi, a seer, that this became his name. And again, brethren, whilst Banduman Raja was sitting as judge, he would take the boy on his hip, and so lay down the law as to the cases arising, till verily the boy, thus seated on his father's hip, and continually considering, would also determine the points of the matter according to justice. Then, at the thought, it is the babe who is judging cases aright, even further and further did that word a seer become used as his name. Now, Banduman Raja, brethren, had 3 palaces built for the boy Vipassi, one for the rains, one for the winter, and one for the summer. And he had them fitted with every kind of gratification for the 5 senses. Thus it came to pass that Vipassi spent the 4 months of the rainy season in the rains palace, ministered by bands of female musicians, and not once did he come down from the upper terrace into the mansion. And that concludes this passage. And then continuing on, this is another narrative of another king, when he's actually a king, and it describes the number of wives that he has. One prominent wife, head wife, and then the rest referred to as part of his harem, and that's the English translation of the word. But again, the king having many wives before going on to the spiritual life, the spiritual awakening. So this is from the Mahasuddasana Sutta, chapter, this is the 17th 17 Sutta, it's chapter 2, verse 7, chapter 2, verse 7. Now Ananda, after the lapse of many years, of many hundred years, of many thousand years, there occurred to the Queen of Glory this thought: 'Tis long since I have beheld the great King of Glory. Suppose now I were to go and visit the great King of Glory. Then Ananda, the Queen of Glory, said to the women of the harem, Arise now, dress your hair, and clad yourselves in fresh raiment. 'Tis long since we have beheld the great King of Glory. Let us go and visit the great King of Glory. Even so, ladies, said the women of the harem, Ananda in assent to the Queen of Glory. And they dressed their hair and clad themselves in fresh raiment and came near to the Queen of Glory. Then Ananda, the Queen of Glory, said to the great advisor, Arrange, O great advisor, the fourfold army in array. 'Tis long since I have beheld the great King of Glory. I am about to go to visit the great King of Glory. Even so, O Queen, said the great advisor, Ananda in assent to the Queen of Glory, and he set the fourfold army in array, and had the fact announced to the Queen of Glory in the words, The fourfold army, O Queen, is set for thee in array. Do now whatever seemeth to thee fit. And this concludes this passage. So again, it is the norm. It is the protocol, not necessarily for everybody, but in society, for there to be certain men who have multiple wives. Amidst all the pluses and minuses with that, that's part of the heritage and the tradition within India at that time of the Buddha. So, from this point we go into the teachings from Hinduism itself, from India, that precedes the Buddha. These predominantly come from the Chandogya Upanishads. There's one excerpt from the Bhagavad Gita. So, the Bhagavad Gita abstains from dealing specifically or very in too much detail about the specific experience of marriage. The Bhagavad Gita deals specifically with the spiritual path, the nature of relationship in a like a cosmic metaphysical experience, like the non-dualism kind of experience. It addresses the household experience, the temptations and the importance of discipline, but it abstains from giving a delineation of like doctrines and statutes about relationship between man and woman, compared to the doctrines given within the Torah or within the Quran. Now the Upanishads provides further narratives that give examples of what marriage is like and gives insight about the guidance concerning marriage. And actually that's what this first passage is addressing. And in this passage there's a Brahmin who has wisdom, and the Brahmin I think is actually, there's a Sudra actually, so the fourth caste, the Brahmin, Kshatriya, Vaishya, and Sudra. So Sudra is a worker, but this worker is actually a king. He establishes an amount of wealth, and so this king wants wisdom. He wants to get some knowledge, and so he hears about the Brahmin. He wants to go to the Brahmin, and he brings with him, as is the custom, some gifts to offer the Brahmin for the teaching. When he first arrived, the Brahmin just declined and rejects him and says, I don't care about any of this. I don't have any use for this. So then the king goes back and gets even further materials to provide as a gift, and in addition to that, brings the king's own daughter and gives his daughter as a wife to the Brahmin. And in receiving that, the Brahmin agrees, because he recognizes through having a wife and having that marital relations, he has the ability to convey the wisdom that he has onto others. And so in seeing that, he accepts the gifts, and he accepts the daughter of the king as a wife, and then conveys to the king the wisdom that the Brahmin has. So that's basically the synopsis of this passage. It comes from the Chandogya Upanishad. It is Kanda from the fourth section, chapter 2, verse 1 through 5. Uno a cinco. Then Janashruti, the great grandson of Janashruta, took with him 600 cows, a necklace, and a chariot with mules, and went to Raikva, and said, Raikva, here are 600 cows, a necklace, and a chariot with mules. Pray, revered sir, teach me the celestial whom you worship. To him the other said, may the necklace and the chariot remain with you, O Sudra, along with the cows. Thereupon Janasutri, the great grandson of Janashruta, took with him 1,000 cows, a chariot with mules, a necklace, and his own daughter too, and went to Raikva. Janasruti said to him, Raikva, here are 1,000 cows, a necklace, chariot with mules, this wife, and this village where you shall dwell. Revered sir, teach me. Then, considering her, the princess, as the door for imparting knowledge, Raikva said, O Shudra, you brought these cows and other presents. This is beneficial. But you will make me speak now only through this means, the princess. And that concludes the reading of this passage. And then we go on to an excerpt from the Bhagavad Gita. This is the opening of the Bhagavad Gita. And Arjuna is faced with the prospect of killing, but fighting his own relatives, his cousins, who are corrupt and trying to take things over. Arjuna is a Kshatriya. He's a king. He's a warrior. He's a prince, and so he has the responsibility of standing up to that type of corruption. But at the same time, he sees that that's his own relatives, and he just sees the prospect of like, what use is there killing relatives? Like, what use is life itself if this is what things get down to? If he has children, like the prospect of his sons being at war with each other, the sons of his sons, and additionally, that's exactly what Arjuna is confronted with when looking at his cousins across the battlefield, and so he's despaired with that. He talks about corruption, and the specific point here is the corruption of women and how significant that is within the experience of the family. And again, this relates back to what is shared within the passage from the Torah, and looking at the following the deities of others and being corrupted through the harlotry and the seduction of women from other walks of life or from other ways of being. And so once the corruption of the women occurs, the family itself and the state, the country, the society itself falls into chaos, and because there's little faith. Children have little faith in their mothers because they see the corruption, and when children have little faith in mothers, then children go buck wild, and additionally, and everything becomes haphazard, like with Sodom and Gomorrah. So again, we're having this shared response, to shared knowledge about the conditions of the corruptions of the flesh. So this is the Arjuna Visada Yogahe, the chapter 1 within the Bhagavad Gita, verse 35 a 46, 35 to 46. These, O Madhusudana, I would not kill, though they should kill me, even for the sake of sovereignty over the three worlds, but how much less for this earth? O Janardana, what joy can be ours in killing these sons of Dhritarashtra? Sin alone will possess us if we kill these felons. Therefore we ought not to kill our kinsmen, the sons of Dhritarashtra. For, O Madhava, how can we ever be happy by killing our own people? Though they, their understanding overcome by greed, perceive no evil in the decay of families and no sin in hostility to friends, why, O Janadarna, should not we, who clearly perceive the evil in the decay of families, learn to refrain from this sin? With the decay of family perishes dharma, which exists from time out of mind. With the ending of the dharma, adharma overwhelms the whole family. When adharma overwhelms the family, O Krishna, the women of the family become corrupt. And when, O Krishna, the women are corrupt, there arises a mixing of castes. This mixture leads into hell the family itself, as well as those who destroy it. For their ancestors fall deprived of the offerings of rice balls and water. By these evil deeds of the destroyers of families, which result in the mixing of castes, the eternal dharma of caste and family are uprooted. We have heard it said, O Janadarna, that inevitably the men whose family dharma are destroyed dwell in hell. Alas, we are resolved to commit a great sin, in that we are ready to slay our kinsmen to satisfy our greed for the pleasure of a kingdom. Much better would it be for me if the sons of Dhritarashtra, weapons in hand, should slay me in the battle, unarmed and unresisting. That concludes the reading of this passage. So, basically, what I just articulate, the despair at the prospect of killing one's own relatives, even though they're corrupt and deluded by greed and the corruption of the flesh. So, this final passage from the teachings of India, specifically of Hinduism, also comes from the Chandogya Upanishad. It is actually the beginning of the Chandogya Upanishad. And it, again, much like the narrative of Bereshit, it speaks to the primordial nature of existence, life, and relationship with the Most High, with Elohim, with Brahman, whatever name we apply to the Most High, and the purpose, the guidance within this relationship with Creator as well as with other life. And so this is the beginning of the Chandogya Upanishad, again putting context into the whole phenomenon of marriage, the purpose of marriage, the purpose of life, and the purpose of procreation, being fruitful and multiply. So here it is. The syllable Om, called the Gita, should be meditated upon, for people sing the Gita beginning with Om. Now follows the detailed explanation of the syllable. The essence of all these beings is the earth. The essence of earth is water. The essence of water is plants. The essence of plants is a being. The essence of a being is speech. The essence of speech is the Rig Veda. The essence of the Rig Veda is the Samaveda. The essence of the Samaveda is the Udgita, which is Om. That Udgita Om is the best of all essences, the supreme, deserving the highest place, the eighth. What then is the Rig? What is the Saman? What is the Udgita? This is to be considered. Speech indeed is the Rig, the vital breath. Prana is the Saman. The syllable Om is the Udgita. Speech and the Prana, or Rig, and the Saman form a couple, and that couple become united in the syllable Om. When a pair come together, they fulfill each other's desire. I'm going to continue in reading the completion of this chapter, just for the full breadth of it. So again, repeating from beginning with, or continuing on from verse 6 says, and that couple become united in the syllable Om. When a pair come together, they fulfill each other's desire. He who knows this, as stated above, and meditates on the syllable Om, the Udgita, becomes indeed a fulfiller of desires. The syllable Om is utilized to give assent, for wherever one assents to something, one says Om, yes. Now, what is assent is gratification. He who knows this and meditates on the syllable Om, the Udgita, becomes indeed a gratifier of desires. By means of this syllable, the threefold knowledge proceeds. When the Adarvu priest gives an order in an offering, he says Om. When the Hotri priest recites the hymn, he says Om. When the Udgatri priest sings the Saman, he says Om. All this is done for the glory of the imperishable Atman, by the greatness of that syllable and by its essence. It may be contended that he who knows this true meaning of the syllable Om and he who does not perform the same offering and therefore must reap the same fruit. But this is not so. The results of knowledge and ignorance are different. Work that is done with knowledge, faith, and the Upanishad, meditation on the celestial, produces the further powerful fruit. This is verily the detailed explanation of the syllable Om. So, that concludes this reading of the passage. It also brings back together the experience of Korban, the offering. The importance of offering is part of that relationship between the material and the heavenly. The Korban is described within the Torah. I mentioned it briefly as a part of the prescription that Moshe Rabbeinu establishes. It is actually established with Noach at the conclusion of the flood. It continues with Avraham Avinu, and then it is codified within the laws of Moshe Rabbeinu. It is discontinued at the moment because of the conditions of the temple, but actually precedes the construction of the temple. So, and it's a fundamental component of a man's relationship with God. It's part of the cleansing. It's a part of making atonement. It's part of redemption. It's part of redemption, and additionally, so that same wisdom concerning puja or concerning korban is practiced within Hinduism as well. It is called puja. So, again, there is that congruence, there is that continuity, there is that shared wisdom. So, again, there's further full circle. And that concludes this reading of the Upanishads from India. We continue on with the teachings from China. So the first one we have is from Lunye, the teachings from Confucius. And again, the teachings that are provided from Lunye, from Tao Te Ching, and from Meng Tse abstain from providing a very specific concerning marriage. It gives a lot of narratives. It gives a lot of guidance generally. A lot of there's further guidance specifically provided from Meng Tse. There's some pragmatic guidance provided from Kong Tse and in the Lunye, and that's where the first passage here is taken, affirming marriage, and even affirming men having multiple wives, as the passage from Meng Tse shares. Now, the teachings from the Tao Te Ching are further esoteric and talk about life and spirituality and nature and relationship with the phenomena around us, rather than specifically within the context of marriage. There is the affirmation of the relationship between men and women, the masculine and feminine, and that's what the third passage here addresses, is the nature of that relationship between man and woman, the masculine and feminine, and the dynamics within that relationship. So, the first passage here is from Lunye and Confucius. So again, this narrative is one where it describes Confucius affirming the institution of marriage. He actually gives his own daughter to a man who he deems to be worthy. And then there's the next passage, the next verse, that describes him giving the daughter of his brother in marriage to another man whom he deems worthy. So again, there's the affirmation of marriage. This is Lunye, chapter 5, verse 1, and it reads as follows. The master says of Kung Ye Chong that he was a suitable choice for a husband, for though he was in jail, it was not as though he had done anything wrong. He gave him his daughter in marriage. The master said of Nang Chung that when the way prevailed in the state, he was not cast aside, and when the way fell into disutilization, he stayed clear of the humiliation of punishment. He gave him his elder brother's daughter in marriage. And this concludes the reading of the passage from Lunye. Again, it's basic just affirmation of marriage. Even Kung Tse himself is married and has a son, which is shared within Lunye directly, but also further specifically within Meng Ke in another scripture. So reading from the Mengzi, there is the Mengzi describes the narrative of Shun, and Shun is a quintessential scholar sovereign or saint sovereign whose righteousness is so significant that he's selected by heaven and then seen by earth and the contemporary king as the successor of earthly rule. And so in that process, he's actually alienated from his own parents. And so within the culture of filial piety, Kung Tzu describes the 5 basic relationships, Wu Lun, and filial piety, the responsibility that a son has to his father, that a son has to his parents, and additionally the honor, the respect, the support is substantial. And so in this particular narrative, when Shun has this righteousness, even though he has this righteousness and it's recognized by heaven and it's recognized by the king at that moment, the standing king, it's not recognized by his own parents. His own parents shun him, which is interesting, homonym right there. But even in that point, the standing king, at the risk of what many people might perceive as breaking protocol, the own standing king himself gives the Shun his own 2 daughters as wives to Shun. So again, it's the affirmation of marriage, but then it's also the affirmation of a man having 2 wives. Specifically within this narrative of a man who's considered one of the most righteous amongst all the ancients within Chinese tradition. And so this passage is somewhat lengthy, so I'm simply going to read the whole of it, and I've shared the context of it. So obviously there's a lot within it, but this is the basic in terms of addressing the basic experience of marriage, and particularly the marriage of a man with 2 wives. So this is from the 17th chapter of Mengzi, verse 1 through 2, chapters 1 through 2. The whole delineation or the whole codification of Mengzi is different. There's a number of different methodologies of looking at the citation from Mengzi, but this is one. Chapter 17, verse chapters 1 through 2. Here it is. Wang Cheng asked Mengzi, saying, "When Shun went into the fields, he cried out and wept towards the pitying heavens. Why did he cry out and weep?" Mengzi replies, "He was dissatisfied and full of earnest desire." Wang Cheng says, "When his parents love him, a son rejoices and forgets them not. When his parents hate him, though they punish him, he does not murmur. Was Shun then murmuring against his parents?" Mengzi answers, "Chengzi asks Kung Ming Kao, saying, as to Shun's going into the fields, I have received your instructions, but I do not know about his weeping and crying out to the pitying heavens and to his parents." Kung Ming Kao answers him, "You do not understand that matter." Now Kung Ming Kao supposed that the heart of the filial son could not be free of sorrow. Shun would say, "I exert my strength to cultivate the fields, but I am here thereby only discharging my office as a son. What can there be in me that my parents do not love me?" The king caused his own children, 9 sons and 2 daughters, the various officers, oxen and sheep, storehouses and granaries, all to be prepared to serve Shun amidst the channeled fields. Of the scholars of the kingdom there were multitudes who flocked to him. The sovereign designed that Shun should superintend the kingdom along with him, and then to transfer it to him entirely. But because his parents were not in accord with him, he felt like a poor man who has nowhere to turn to. To be delighted in all by the scholars of the kingdom is what men desire, but it was not sufficient to remove the sorrow of Shun. The possession of beauty is what men desire, and Shun had for his wives the 2 daughters of the Tai. But this was not sufficient to remove his sorrow. Riches are what men desire, and the kingdom was the rich property of Shun, but this was not sufficient to remove his sorrow. Honors are what men desire, and Shun had the dignity of being sovereign, but this was not sufficient to remove his sorrow. The reason why the being of the object of men's delight with the possession of beauty, riches, and honors were not sufficient to remove his sorrow was that it could be removed only by his getting his parents to be in accord with him. The desire of the child is towards his father and more. When he becomes conscious of the attractions of beauty, his desire is towards young and beautiful women. When he comes to have a wife and children, his desire is towards them. When he obtains office, his desire is towards his sovereign. If he cannot get the regard of his sovereign, he burns within. But the man of great filial piety, to the end of his life, has his desire towards his parents. In the great Shun, I see the case of one whose desire at 50 years was towards them. One Chong asks Menko, saying, "It is said in the book of Forgery, in marrying a wife, how ought a man to proceed? He must inform his parents. If the rule be indeed as here expressed, no man ought to have illustrated it so well as Shun. How was it that Shun's marriage took place without his informing his parents?" Menko replies, "If he had informed them, he would not have been able to marry. That male and female should dwell together is the greatest of human relations. If Shun had informed his parents, he must have made void this greatest of human relations, thereby incurring their resentment. On this account he did not inform them." Wang Chong says, "As to Shun's marrying without informing his parents, I have heard your instructions, but how was it that the Ti Yao gave him his daughters as wives without informing Shun's parents?" Meng Tzu says, "The Ti also knew that if he informed them, he could not marry his daughters to him." Wang Chong says, "His parents set Shun to repair a granary, to which the latter having been removed, Ku Sao set fire. They also made him dig a well. He got out, but they, not knowing that, proceeded to cover him up." Song says, "Of the scheme to cover up the city-forming prince, the merit is all mine. Let my parents have his oxen and sheep. Let them have his storehouses and granaries. His shield and spear shall be mine. His lute shall be mine. His bow shall be mine. His 2 wives I shall make attend to my bed." Song then went away into Shun's palace, and there was Shun on his couch playing on his lute. Song says, "I am come simply because I was thinking anxiously about you." At the same time he blushed deeply. Shun said to him, "There are all my officers. Do you undertake the government of them for me?" I do not know whether Shun was ignorant of Song's wishing to kill him. Meng Tzu answers, "How should he be ignorant of that? But when Song was sorrowful, he was also sorrowful. When Song was joyful, he was also joyful." Chong says, "In that case, then did not Shun rejoice hypocritically?" Meng Tzu replies, "No. Formerly, someone sent a present of a live fish to Tsung Chong of Chong. Tzu Chong ordered his pond keepers to keep it in the pond, but the officer cooked it and reported the execution of his commission, saying, 'When I first let it go, it embarrassed. In a little while, it seemed to be somewhat at ease. Then it swam away joyfully.' Tzu Chong observed, 'It had got into its element. It had got into its element.' The pond keeper then went out and said, 'Who calls Tzu Chong a wise man? After I had cooked and eaten the fish, he says, it had got into its element. It had got into its element.' Thus a superior man may be imposed on by what seems to be as it ought to be, but he cannot be entrapped by what is contrary to right principle. Chong came in the way in which the love of his elder brother would have made him come. Therefore Shun sincerely believed him and rejoiced. What hypocrisy was there?" That concludes the reading of this passage. And again, there's a lot of narrative within this, a lot of principles, but again, it's a matter of affirming the institution of marriage, the relationship of marriage, even amidst the challenges of the disapproval of parents and the rivalries of the brethren, and further. It also gets into the notion of deception, the notion, perhaps somewhat contrastly, whereas the serpent is recognized as deceiving through honesty. There's the consideration of those who try to deceive a righteous person responding to that with honesty, even though it's perceived as naivete, because the nature of the righteousness is such that it's not to be too presumptuous or conclusive about what others say, but at the same time taking people at people's word and finding a truth that exists, that is congruent between the deceptions that people feign and the actuality of conditions. So that's another little bit of another topic, another bit of another level. But anyways, that's part of what's shared here. Now, the concluding passage of this whole joint comes from Lao Tzu, the Tao Te Ching. It is chapter 61, and again, it's about the primordial relationship between man and woman, masculine and feminine, the yin and the yang. And so it reads as this. The large country is like the lowest river, the converging point of the world, the receptive female of the world. The female always overcomes the male with serenity, utilizing serenity as the lower position. Thus, if the large country is lower than the small country, then it can take the small country. If the small country is lower than the large country, then it can be taken by the large country. Thus, one utilizes the lower position to take, the other utilizes the lower position to be taken. The large country only wishes to gather and protect people. The small country only wishes to join and serve people. So that both obtain what they wish, the larger one should assume the lower position. And that concludes the reading from the Tao Te Ching. Now, there's beautiful, beautiful insight and guidance that is shared here. It's very dense, and at the moment, to be honest, I would have to conjure some significant concentration to share my understanding of this particular passage, the basics of it. Some of the elements, obviously, is the relationship man and woman, but then we have large and small, those dichotomies, and then we have higher and lower, and then we have how large. We have the different boxes. So we have in the four characteristics of small and large, high and low. We have the small country in the lower position. We have the small country in the higher position. We have the large country in the lower position, and we have the large country in the higher position. And there are different characteristics to the small and the large, and there are different characteristics to being the lower and being the upper. And being the lower doesn't necessarily mean being subservient. It's a matter of understanding the nature of both. There's a necessity within both. There's a subservience and a I'm trying to think of the contrary or the converse to subservience. There's an authority and a subservience within both of those characteristics. And then, in terms of male and female, masculine and feminine, when each one is in either of those four characteristics, what the role is in being in a relationship with each other. The purpose is for there to be harmony and congruence. And so, amidst whatever the conditions are, small and large, high and low, wherever one finds oneself in a relationship with another, wherever a man finds himself with a woman, wherever a woman finds herself with a man, to recognize the nature of those characteristics and then to proceed accordingly. So with that being said, that concludes this joint on that respect. Now I'm going to check the time, and we at those hours. Now this feels like that. All right. We got some adjustments to do in terms of text because we do not have it all in the notes. We're at 25 gigs, so we're decent with that. I'm supposed to continue on to some other narratives. So yeah, I'm on the bus the other day. Yesterday, actually, or 2 days ago, depending on how you count the days. On the bus before Shabbat on Friday afternoon. And during that point, a brother is on the bus. And he's talking on the phone loud, obnoxious. Now I'm carrying stuff, so I'm being mindful of that. I'm at the front of the bus. I'm just trying to be at my own business, whatever. Just trying to get things done before Shabbat begins. So now that being said, this brethren, with peace and blessings be with the brethren. The brethren is talking loud and obnoxious, like he's belligerently loud. He's not like hostile and he's not like agitated, but he's like it's like one of those things. He's intentional, like he's doing it on purpose. And the things he's talking about like got to get in a room, getting drugs, getting a woman, and like getting it all set up and everything. And he's saying this loud in front of the whole bus, and again, knowingly, intentional, to the point where before and continually, I'll just say a song. I'll sing something loud to balance those levels. I'm not trying to be antagonistic or whatever, but just balance the levels because I ain't trying to hear all that. Now that's it when like just off general a basic principle, just not trying to hear the conversation. If somebody's being that loud and belligerent, raising the volume to match that again. Now on this particular occasion, what he's saying, it's like, you just can't let that be said. Children on the bus, women on the bus, and this dude is talking about basically getting a woman and doing her dirty, and getting drugs and everything else like that. And so at one point, again, like, I'm not trying to be in things, but at the same time, I just say, brother, what is you talking about? And I had to hold myself back and say, I didn't hold myself back. I'm saying, like, check myself and be like, peace and blessings be with you, but what you talking about? And then he tries to like clean it up, and he does it in like the street vernacular. He's like he's not apologetic or whatever, but at the same time, he's like he's like addressing what it said and trying to clean it up or whatever, but at the same time not backing down from it. So he's like, oh no, we're just talking about weed. I'm like, but you talking about getting a woman and doing this and the other? And he's like, no, I'm talking about white girl. It's like, what? And I said, you put yourself on blast, brother. Like I'm not trying to be in your business, but you talking loud for the whole bus. Everybody can hear you. Now at that point, when I said something, now some other kinfolk started like to back me up in recognizing what I'm saying. So there's appreciation for that. And so the brethren was respectful to me and not like getting an argument, whatever else. And again, it's so intentional. Like it's so staged. Things they're doing. Like cats know what they're doing. Many cats have an idea who I am and do things intentionally. Try to test, see what cats can get away with. I just finished talking with a sister before that about elders bumping R. Kelly at a cookout with children there, and talking about, yo, what's going on with that? So that was literally right before I got onto the bus. So now the brethren is on the bus talking about doing a woman and no, it's okay. It's a white girl. No, we got drugs and no, and that's what he's saying on the phone. Oh, we got drugs and oh, it's okay. We got all set up and everything. No, it's okay. So anyways, after I talk with him, I already know. I'm trying to get an argument, whatever, but just put him on notice. Like, yo, notice whatever. But just like, yo, come on, give him an opportunity to like, yo, just like to clean this stuff up. Now I let it go. Then the brother kept on talking about the plans. So I'm like, all right, now I know my stop is coming up. I'm not vested in. I'm not going to stay on the bus or whatever. I got other things to do. But I'll let it be as is. Now to the kinfolk who are now the rest of the bus is quiet, and that's what's the trouble is, because when I see other people quiet, just observing and not saying anything, hearing what the brethren is talking about and not saying anything, that's the trouble. And that's what's being tested, or that's one of the things that's being tested. So when seeing the brother on the phone continuing on belligerent and talking the same thing like nothing happened, there's no arguing with that. Just like I said, Cassis ain't got the head to be recognizing. Ain't no arguing with that. So recognizing that, I addressed the brethren who did speak up, who did acknowledge, and I said, you know what? Some cats is intent on digging their own, and there's little to do about that. Some cats is intent on digging their own. For us who are mindful of that, it's just a matter of being mindful about keeping a distance about where we sit and where we stand accordingly when we see cats who's digging their own. So that's it. That's no hate. That's no shade. That's facts. You can call that game, whatever. That's facts. Ain't no hate, no shade. Love and peace to all kinfolk. But anyways, particularly when kinfolk are doing others dirty, that's when there's responsibility beyond just oneself. So anyways, that was again part of the experience of relationship and healthy being, recognizing that marriage is a bond between a man and a woman, but marriage is also a bond between man and a woman. Between that man and that woman and the rest of the community that supports that marriage, supports that relationship, and so it's a matter of honoring that and attending to that. So there's that. I'm trying to think. There's one other thing I share at the moment. I'm discerning amidst the circumstances what's going on. I don't know if the flashing lights are very evident from this vantage, but that's what's going on here. Actually, the line dispersed a long time ago, and it was kind of like got back to normal. But now it's just like it's like happy hour now. So, all right. All right, so now I'm going to get to personal story time, and there can be TMI, but this helps put things in context. I mentioned having the conversation about the R. Kelly thing, talking about pedophilia, and additionally. So, to be honest, I have to remember where this actually goes, where I'm going with this, and sharing this. I'm not going to try to think about or concentrate on it at this moment. I'm just going to share it. It's generally referring to the notion or the experience of healthy relationship, recognizing how unhealthy the norm and the regularity of society is at this moment, and then how we proceed, how we navigate through these conditions accordingly as best as possible. The basic guidance and the basic formula, the basic solution is land. Not even a lot of land, but just enough land to be a village and have self-determination to protect the life of our families, our wives, our children, our elders, the vulnerable within our community, the vulnerable within our families, our men, our youth, all kinfolk in our family, and all kinfolk in our villages. Have land to do that, to reside amongst each other and be supportive of each other, regularly gather together, regularly convene rituals with each other, education, and further economics, cooperative economics, and further, and build with other bridges, or build bridges with other villages. That's the answer. That's the solution. There are different methodologies of doing it: off-grid, on-grid, combination off-grid, on-grid, and additionally, we're looking at this point. The iteration is a Rastafari youth hostel, so it goes through an evolution process. We are making some progression. Anyway, without getting into, I'm getting into the story time. So, anyways, that's the solution. That's where it's guiding. But in that process, we're dealing right now still at marriage. So this is still a path, and I'm also going to share this while it's still comparatively dry, because we've been getting sprinkles for a long time, and it's like random sprinkles. So in the remote occasion of there being further precipitation, I'm going to just get into this and endeavor to get it. I'm trying to think again, lightweight. I'm trying to think of where this is going, but I'm just going to just share. So we're talking about society. We're talking about relationship. We're talking about abuse. We're talking about healthy relationship, healthy marriage, and how to return to that experience. Again, in the context of the primordial experience of be fruitful and multiply, the experience of the garden, beyond the notions of original sin or whatever, but recognizing where we come from in terms of our own personal family histories, what we've learned, what we've experienced, what we learned since being young children, what we've been exposed to in terms of media and society, the abuses of towards each other, man towards woman, woman towards man, the fears, the overcompensations, the game being played, the jealousies, the greed, the hatred, and the delusion, even just within the relationship between man and woman, and how exasperated those gets, how severe those corruptions and those fears and that suffering is compounded generation after generation, and day after day, year after year, even within one's own life, being raised in experiences of abject abuse, without having anybody to look to in terms of the safety and otherwise, and then how to be in a healthy relationship after having that experience. So, with that in mind, I am sharing my personal experience, my personal history, and the process of reconciliation, of learning better, and then progressing further. Peace and blessings. Take courage. So, here we go. Now to begin with, here we go. And where science falls into this, and where government falls into this lightweight, but particularly science and doctors. And do I have something against doctors? Not personally, not specifically, but recognizing the unchecked authority, the unquestioned authority. So that's part of this. It's serious, yes. So here we go. From my very birth, I've been severely abused by science, sexually abused even by science. How can that be? What am I talking about? No hyperbole. Here comes the raindrops. So now we're gonna do a little bit of the cover, and if this is insufficient, we're gonna take some steps back. So, no hyperbole, complete facts, and I'll say what I'm talking about. I'm told by my birth mother, that when I am born, the nurses separate me from my mom at one point, and this is protocol. This is standard protocol in many ways, at least particularly I guess 50 years ago, and we're approaching that point of 50 years. But indeed, here come, interestingly enough, the raindrops. So we are going to, because whilst I'm about to get into this, and I'm not trying to get up whilst I get into this. So it's so little. It's tempting. All right, I'm just going to do it. All right. When I am born, the nurses separate me from my more. And in separating me from my more, provide me with a formula, some formula of what's it called? It's not Similac, but to that effect. Some just like whatever the medicinal nursing material, whatever. That's what the nurses provide me. All right. Peace and blessings. Peace and blessings to you. So, that's what the nurses do. And again, in many ways, it's at least I understand it as basic standard procedure. Now, after doing that, after introducing me to that formula, it is told to me by my more that I refused suckling from my more, that I would not take from her breast milk, and that she felt devastated by that because she felt rejected that her son would not take from her own milk. And so that is the experience. And so obviously I'm a newborn in this narrative. And what do I know and everything else like that. But it's one, it's utilized as guilt tripping me of me it being my fault that I rejected, and that sounds silly, it sounds sarcastic, but that's actual. It's part of the manipulation. That's from my more, but that's also in cohesion or collusion with the doctors or the science, medicine, whatever. Now, is that paranoid? Is that like hyperbole? Is that going too much? Absolutely not. And do I blame the doctors? Do I blame them more? Nah, I'm just communicating facts. This is just what happens. Now, is it a separation? Yes. Does it have, well, one thing, it's just a matter of recognizing it isn't very much intentional on the part of the doctors and a part of the practice of medicine to separate each individual from the natural relationship of family and the further natural relationships of relatives and society. Because in that separation, the individual is increasingly susceptible to the manipulation and the reliance upon the authority of doctors that becomes further established during the course of an individual's life. So it is very much intentional, and it's not just a matter of happenstance. Part of that intention, a significant part of that intention, is increasingly separating an individual from the birth mother in the advent of that sacred, holy experience of a child sucking from the child's mother's breast. So that's me from birth. That's sexual abuse. And how is it sexual? Because it's delving into that sacred experience of birth and the whole Freudian elements that emerge from that separation. Just when people talk about a woman having daddy issues and a man having mommy issues, as it applies to the relational prospects of that woman and man respectively, that's exactly sexual. But it's obviously it's at a stage before one is even anywhere near being sexually active. It's still sexual because the groundwork is being established. So that's sexual abuse from giddy up, from day one, from the day of my birth. Now it exists before that, but particularly from the day of birth. Now, one other thing to add in this element is that it doesn't exist only in one direction. Peace and blessings, bro. It doesn't exist only in one direction because I'm trying to think how much I share here. No, I'll share this here now. So it's beneficial to recognize that those protocols and that thing, not all families like allow that to happen. Like a mother might say, no way, don't give my child any family formula. My child is only going to take from me directly, and has a certain amount of fortitude in setting down the rules about birth, even when having a OBGYN and additionally or obstetrician and nursing or a midwife or whatever otherwise. Saying no, this is what we got to do, and I'm not doing it additionally, and being very proactive in maintaining that natural relationship between more and child. So some families have that fortitude. Some families have that knowledge. Some families are without that fortitude and or knowledge. And science and doctors make note and make advantage accordingly. So, again, it's just facts and actuality. Now, it just so happens that my parents are mixed. My father is predominantly of African ancestry, and additionally, my mother is predominantly of European ancestry. So during that time, probably 50 years ago, are in a precarious position of trying to assimilate within middle class. Both are university educated professionals, a teacher and a pharmacist, and so have the credentials and the income of having very, what they call it, some types of livelihood. Advancing or means of livelihood, but at the same time still need sanction from the rest of society, in particularly raising children and ingratiating the society or ingratiating the children within society, and so are increasingly marginalized, increasingly leveraged in negotiating with authorities within society about conditions concerning the parent or concerning the children. Whereas when a family is increasingly established and doesn't care what the hospital says or what the teachers say or whatever else, we don't care about being a stink or whatever else, we got backup in our community, in our hood, then the parents are further forthright in standing up for their children. But when parents are trying to like just be low key and not make waves, when a nurse says this or when a teacher says that, it's like, okay, we'll make the best of what we can. It's that type of situation. So particularly when kinfolk are in a mixed marriage, a mixed heritage marriage, particularly 50 years ago, there is that increasing leverage in marginalization and susceptibility. And so this is part of the situation. And doctors and medicine is aware of that. And so this is one of the strongholds of establishing that type of authority and that influence within the general public, is through these families that have this susceptibility, this vulnerability. Mixed heritage is just one. Other families that are trying to make do one way or the other are others. But mixed heritage families are increasingly pronounced and obvious, being like, oh no, yeah, we got these kinfolk. They're not gonna argue with us. So that's that. Now, so again, those are just the conditions. Ain't no blame, ain't no hate. That's just conditions. This is just facts. Now, later on, when I'm 11 months old actually, again, science causes certain abuse concerning myself. Not specifically sexual, but it does involve very, very further reliance and additionally. And so, in this particular instance, I'm 11 months old. Now, how does science get involved in this? We'll show you. So, in this particular scenario, I am 11 months old. I'm at the babysitter's, and I'm left on my own. And I just happen to find a bead from like a necklace or whatever, and I swallow that bead. I start choking. The babysitter sees it and then calls the ambulance, whatever else. I'm taken to the hospital. Eventually, there's surgery that's performed in order to remove the bead from my lungs. It had gotten into my lungs. So to prevent it from getting infected and otherwise, the surgery is conducted with me at 11 months old, and then the bead is removed. Now, what does science have to do with this? Mass production of plastics to the point where it's pervasive. Science is responsible for that. It's not hate, it's not shape, it's not blame. Peace and blessings. That's just facts. People leave things out or whatever. There's responsibility, there's liability for that. It's accountability. So when science has these different ways of doing it, cars being manufactured, pollution being made, plastic bags being done, and a child finds it and suffocates from that, science is significantly responsible for that. Not solely, but significantly responsible. Is that blame? It's shared. There is an element of blame in that. There's blame all around, but the part of not blaming is not to vilify in that blame. It's a matter of recognizing cause and effect and who is responsible in being a causal factor in that effect. Science is significantly part of it, because even though it's remote, it is very pervasive, and to the point of people just having plastic all around. Now, that being said, it's also the babysitter. Maybe observing myself and my family, again, being somewhat marginalized, not being so attentive to me, leaving me to my own devices at 11 months old, crawling on the ground and finding this bead on the floor, and additionally. So those are the conditions. But the point is that in this scenario, there becomes this trope within my personal life of having appreciation for the doctors, saving my life, performing this critical surgery, this very severe surgery on an 11-month-old child in order to continue living. So now there's this sense of beholdenness to doctors and less questioning when doctors might say something concerning later on in life, in the next few years or whatever, of like, but no, we have to be thankful because remember what the doctors did. And so we get that guilt trip. And then again, there's a guilt trip on my parents towards the babysitter of like, look what you did endangering my child. And now we have nice babysitting service for the rest of life for myself and my siblings. And it further ingratiated within the middle class of society because this babysitter almost let me die. So the guilt trip goes in a lot of different ways, and it's very influential in how things get done at the micro level, in the micro level relationships within society, between families, schools, and the different components of community, particularly within a modern, postmodern society. So it goes all in all directions. So that's part of the context. And again, like I said, when these things happen, the doctors are the heroes, and we don't question what the heroes do, so that later on when the doctors want to stick a thermometer in the anus of a child to catch the temperature, just as a regular routine checkup, there's little questioning the legitimacy of the doctors accordingly. So now that's a normal thing. It's a normalized thing. A doctor putting a thermometer, not even on a sick child or a fever necessarily, but just as a routine checkup, putting a thermometer in the child's anus. And then later on, when the child is a toddler and when the child is in elementary school, a young child, the regular performance of bodily exams, either with just the shirt off or full exams, genital reviews by the doctors, and additionally, turn and cough, and further, with the parent present, without the parent present, but with the parent's permission, because there's too much of a concern of questioning the authority and the legitimacy with the doctors. And as it can be seen, that does get in further sexually intimate, it does get further involved, and it does get further separating between the individual and physical intimacy with any other being in this life. And then again, further when we talk about gynecology, a male doctor particularly, but even a female doctor giving guidance to a young girl who's going through menstruation, and additionally, examination, being put in stirrups, and additionally, that's all separating the individual from that type of intimacy and relationship and sanctity of relationship with any other being on this life. And particularly in the methodology of not just one doctor, but it's just like a faceless doctor, meaning like it's an HMO, it's a hospital, and it's one doctor one day and it's another doctor another day. It becomes a faceless, just like we don't even know who this cat is, but this company says this cat has credentials, and so they sound like they know what they're talking about. They have a white coat on, so it must be. And so getting naked and subjecting oneself to examination, even as a pretext for getting a job, requiring a basic physical, and in that physical, getting naked, and having the doctor touch genitals and make examinations, and additionally, as a pretext, as a prerequisite, a very requirement for getting a job, and doing other things, going to school, going to enrollment, and additionally. So again, it's the normalization of the violation or the invasion of the sexual privacy of an individual, and that affecting the individual's, the integrity of the individual's relationship with any other being in this life, on this earth, in this universe. So that is abuse, because when the doctors live by principles of adultery, of acceptance of adultery and corruption, and additionally, then the nature of that invasion is that corruption too. So that is what we are addressing in this joint. like I said, this goes further. There's further purpose for sharing this. So for myself, in my personal path, talking about, again, sexual abuse and further. So now, again, this is just my personal path, and at the risk of sounding disrespectful to my parents, first of all, peace and blessings to both my parents. My far blessed memory. Both do the best that both know how to do. And there's no hate, there's no shade on my parents. But we do learn better. And in learning better, we are called to do better. And in doing better, it's a matter of teaching. And in teaching, we have to continually process our own challenges, particularly when it comes to relationship and making those types of commitments in marriage and relationship in life. But even in teaching and sharing people who are venturing into a relationship and marriage themselves, and even who've had similar abuses or even further abuses, how to progress beyond these challenges. So that's part of the purpose of this sharing this. So now my narrative continues on because, again, my parents during my childhood live in a comparatively liberal kind of social environment, and part of that involves taking photographs of children and photographs of babies naked, and additionally, and oh, isn't that cute? Children in the bathtub, and additionally, and that's not healthy. And when it's uncomfortable, I remember exactly those occasions when I'm 3, 4, 5 years old, and that being done, and feeling violated, feeling like, where's my privacy? And it's my parents, and so there's trust towards my parents, but at the same time, like, I don't want my photograph being taken. And additionally, now, do I sound like a pathetic grown-ass man, 50 years old, talking about that? It's necessary, because it's that same kind of experience that kinfolk hide and cover up and are ashamed about, and that leave people availed to being pimped and manipulated, because gangsters and pimps know exactly the insecurities of women, the insecurities of men, and how to utilize those insecurities that men and women don't even want to think about against themselves, and in exploitation. So that's the purpose of this. And I know how normalized it is, because you look at TV commercials of naked babies in diapers and even without diapers. Look at television shows. Look at mainstream films in the depictions of children, and additionally. So, and it being looked at as cute and this, that, and the other. So I know I'm not alone. And I know that for years, even though there are very few who will want to talk about that. And it's challenged, it's nasty, and it's difficult, but it's necessary for healing. But that's part of the abuse, because again, that affects a child's relationship and understanding about intimacy, of privacy, sexual intimacy, the sanctity of relationship between a man and a woman, and additionally. So when I have that experience of photographs being taken of me in the bathtub, and additionally, that leads toward, and then further introduced towards pornography at the age of 5. That ignites a fire that does not go away. And so at the age of 5, finding a way of finding some kind of relief from that, no excuses, but then starting to abuse girls around me because of that. Beginning to fondle and additionally entreat girls inappropriately, because that's part of the conditioning that I personally experience. Now, there's additional elements as well that I can speak less of at the moment, because a lot of it is actually just putting puzzle parts together after the fact, years later, and seeing like the evidence of suspect things, but at the same time having difficulty calling it explicitly out with firsthand knowledge and recollection, but knowing enough to say, yo, no, that's what that was. So at the moment, I've already articulated a lot of it already, but at the moment I'm just gonna leave it as it is. But again, it conditions one into the challenges, the insecurities, the uncertainties, the confusion, and the illusions concerning relationship, what healthy relationship is, what healthy sexual relationship is between a man and woman as husband and wife. Having the strength and the discipline to maintain virginity, both a man and a woman, until marriage. When children are exposed to these types of experiences, when the children are conditioned to be revealing in terms of dress. When girls are wearing thigh-high short shorts and skirts, and additionally, and conditioned to be sexually revealing at the ages of 5 and 6 years old. And boys conditioned to see that, boys conditioned to respond to that, and additionally, and boys conditioned to do their own, present themselves in their own different types of ways, even being victims of sexual predatoriness towards, in the guise of pedophilia. It's very difficult to quell those types of yearnings, those types of corruptions in a healthy way, particularly when there's an absence of guidance that provides that direct kind of discipline. So that's part of the concerns, because when the children become adolescents, when a girl enters into puberty and begins to form a womanly body and is increasingly found increasingly attractive to the mainstream society, not just the pedophiles, and is able to utilize that sexuality to be very directly manipulative of men and otherwise. When men become further knowledgeable and further strong and holding themselves against others and manipulating women, knowing the insecurities of other women, and taking advantage of women either personally or pimping women out, and additionally, the seeds are sown at much further ages, both for the victims and for the victimizers. And everybody's a victim in it, but for the victimizers as well, for the predators. So, again, the solution is cultivating healing conditions, the sanctity of village, the security of village, and honesty of conversation and discipline. So those are some of the preceding conditions for myself in the own abuses that I experienced and the challenges I experienced by the time I get to puberty, and discerning like what healthy relationship is, and further and continuing to understand what healthy relationship is, to be able to trust anybody else to suggest what a healthy relationship is, when kinfolk are enveloped in the same kind of game and deceptions and predatoriness of conventional society as well. How to process the ancient teachings about marriage that I just read, and additionally, when it's difficult to apply to contemporary conditions when it seems fewer people are practicing that. There's the tendency of kind of perceiving life in the primordial sense, of the garden sense, and kind of like Dolo style of just like being immersed within not even just the Babylon experience, but just within the wilderness, the garden amidst the wilderness, and dealing with the conditions accordingly. So anyways, this is part of the articulation for understanding, putting it in context, so that rather than an individual trod, it is increasingly, it's a collective knowledge, it's a collective healing, in the interest of collective relationship, supporting relationship. I talked with brethren earlier today about the permissibilities of marriage, and we were talking about initially what's permissible, what's not permissible, and the brethren initially responds with like a live and let live mentality, and then I said, well, okay, that's fair enough, and I identify with that, but at the same time, when we talk about are you willing to put on your life to support and to protect that particular marriage, if it's a polyamorous marriage, or if it's a woman practicing polygyny, and are you willing to like lay your life on the line? If like she's part of the village and somebody's like causing some type of compromise to that relationship, is he willing to do that? And he's like, ain't no way about that. Like, nah, she's not in my crew. So there it is. Like, it's one thing to have and that's no shade. We're reasoning, we're learning, and so there is the benefit in having a live and let live kind of mentality in general speaking. But when we talk about like having that close knit, like, no, this is who he is, this is who we rolling with, and this is what we stand for. If it's all anything goes, like that collective, it gets done up comparatively quick, because it lends itself to the volatility of that anything goes. But when there's increasing discipline in their strict discipline, the numbers might be smaller, but the nature of the cooperation and the integrity and the security in that cooperation is further stronger, because there is a discipline, there's a recognized discipline and accountability to that discipline. Even when somebody violates it, it doesn't mean the person's kicked out and it's the end of days. It just means like, yo, no, hold up, this is how we live. And there's consequences for that. Like, there might be separation, it might be like isolation for a period, like sequestering or whatever. But anyways, it's beneficial to look at that. So that rather than just a philosophy, like that's one of the working products, one of the gifts that's gleaned for that particular reasoning session earlier today during Shabbat. For myself too, is recognizing that it's one thing to believe something as a general notion amongst the general public, but then as a community within ourselves, like we have a higher scrutiny and a higher standard because, yo, I gotta look out for this brethren. So like, if a brethren is starting young, you holler at another woman and be this happened to me just a few weeks ago. I'm with brethren, and we're having a conversation, and then he starts talking to a girl, or not even start talking to a girl, but like he starts like referring to the women walking by who are very attractive, in a rather derogatory way, in a sexual derogatory. I'm like, hold up, nah, don't be talking like that around me. You know what I'm saying? Because that's reflecting on me, and first of all, it's disrespectful to her. So that's point blank. But if that's what you do, yo, we need to be distanced, because that's not how we are, and we are trusted for being righteous and trusted for having respect towards women. So we don't tolerate that type of talk in our presence. So either you got to bounce or I got to bounce, because we can't be having this kind of conversation in conjunction with each other. So that's, again, holding each other accountable. Now, I'm not going around telling everybody that. I'm not right here doing that, because I don't have the same accountability and nature of relationship. The brethren that I talked with before, I know him. We build for a number of years. So there is that relationship, and there is that type of ownness of like, yo, serious. If you're gonna be like this, we gonna interesting that. This is gonna have to be adjusted. So that's an example of what I'm talking about in terms of the difference between having a philosophy of laissez-faire, of live and let live, and like everybody's own world, and then the standards that we hold ourselves accountable to and those immediately around us, because we have a responsibility of protecting the well-being of those immediately around us. So anyways, that was a beneficial work product from a conversation from the reasoning earlier today. We give thanks and praise. So anyways, that's it. Trying to think what else to share. I know there's something else to share. We done did a lot today already, tonight. So we're going to keep it at this. Again, we give all thanks and praise to the Most High, Elohim. I will conclude the reading. I said I did the recitation of the blessings in doing the readings beforehand. I have yet to do the concluding blessing after finishing the reading. So I will do that now. So, Alhamdulillah, Ar-Rahmani, Ar-Rahim. Allah Dao Ke, Dao Fit, Shong, Dao Min, Ke, Min, Fit, Shong, Min, Ja Rastafåri. Deus nos de Kies in Chile, Santa Kita no Ventura, Vahe Gusan. Baruch Ata Elohim, Eloheinu melech haolam, asher kasanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivan v'sok b'dvrei Torah. Amen. Kyrie eleison, Sivomastu Savrigatahi, Sabe Sata Bavantu Sukitata. Fahbir, Aquaba, Upendo Naman, Fikir Nesalami, Chinda Dan Preme, Lebov Me Omajaka. Umbuddha Shubana Fikitka. Sheshe, Kamasimina, Domo Argato, Pilama Yellow Wakato, Tokadokshin, Gomenega. God, we thank you for all your blessings. Ata Jamia Yatafana. All thanks and praise to the Most High. Love and peace. Blessed love and peace in Rastafåri.